It looks like we're live. Just want to check. Oh, I see there's someone already into the chat. Oh, I must have got a new Malcolm Johnson. Let me just pull this up real quick there, Don. Sorry, but the I didn't notice that this was coming up, but someone must have joined with the membership because it's being highlighted here. Thank you very much, Malcolm Johnson, for your membership. I'm not sure what, I won't see it till after I'm done the stream, what level of membership you chose, whether it's a Liberty Explorer, Liberty Hunter, or Liberty Leader, but whatever level you've chosen, I really appreciate it. And at the very least, I'll give you a special shout out for that membership because I really appreciate the financial support that people like folks like you bring. And it's not just a one-time donation. The fact that you're willing to do this on a monthly basis is once again very much appreciated. Now I'm just going to move on. Like I say, so me and Don here. Don is a fellow contributor to thinkspot.com, which is that new social media platform basically set up and created by well, I'm not so much sure if Jordan himself did a whole lot of the work. Obviously not. He's got his own issues that he's dealing with, but obviously it's a ThinkSpot is that site derived based on his forcefulness and at least having some kind of alternative platform for freedom of speech. And as I've said many times in the past, the beautiful thing about this new platform is you can say basically whatever you want, and it's not set up, for politics. It's more about ideas. So you have a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds and wide-ranging perspectives, and obviously intellectual levels. Whether they come from academia, the corporate world. There's lots of people on there hammering out these ideas, and that's something that I've said so many times in the past. Is I'm tired of functioning in echo chambers. I want to talk to people that have bold ideas or offering solutions to some of the ills and the problems that we've seen. It's obviously very much prevalent around us. Is unless you got your head stuck in the sand, there's a lot of economic issues. And of course, that involves the social issues as well. And Don is talking about now. He's got his a particular iteration that we're going to delve into. But the topic is basically universal basic income, or people have said in the past guaranteed income. There's been a couple iterations of it, but basically some way to give people a floor in terms of what kind of economic prosperity they have. But anyways, I want to give turned over to Don here. And like I say, he also uses, what is it? We create the change, right? Is that what is that a website that you have, or we create?
No, that's just a user handle on ThinkSpot.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm just going to hand it over to you, Don, and you just, like I say, just give a short, brief explanation as to who you are, why you want to get involved in this conversation today, and basically we'll go from there.
You put me on the spot.
Oh, did you want to do it in a different way?
No, this is fine. I'm just kind of an ordinary person that find thinking fun. Yep. And what I like to do is rummage around in the toolbox of ideas that may be good or maybe not so good, and see if I can put them together in a way that will have a unique and different function. And okay.
Actually, sorry, Don, before you continue on, did you want me to read that? Because I just realized I can read that letter, that small letter that you sent me.
Sure, that would be good. That would be good.
Okay, that's what I'll do. So yeah, so when we were communicating back and forth through email, he had sent this to me, and I'll just read it, and we'll kind of go from there. So he said, I look forward to joining you on your video show. I do have a few preferences or requests that I would be pleased if you could accommodate. I envision you opening the segment. I am in a very short intro. Perhaps this is the foremost expert on the RUBI system of universal basic income. Then you proceed to express your feelings and reasons for your position. I particularly would like you to compare and contrast welfare versus EBI. So actually, if you want, I could just, instead of just continuing on, I can kind of do that in terms of just dealing with my thought processes on what I've heard from other people or perspective or proponents of EBI. Do you want me to do that, Don?
Yes, that would be great.
Okay, so first and foremost, let me just hold this up now. So it's not, this isn't my first go around with the UBI explanation. Actually, one of my friends on Facebook, he's from Scotland. Not sure if you're familiar yourself there, Don, with Anthony Samarov. He's a really wise young man, and he actually wrote this book. It's called Universal Basic Income, For and Against. And shout out to Anthony. Hopefully he gets a chance to watch the stream. And like I say, even though he's a libertarian himself and he's part of the Libertarian Party in Scotland, he basically, and the way he did it, I thought was excellent, because he actually, like I say, for and against. He posited positive positions, right? that you could express in terms of UBI, and then he offered obviously the cons, right? The negative aspects that he attributed to having a universal basic income. Now, I'm very much familiar with that, and I'm also familiar with the earlier iteration of this stuff that some people that promote some form of basic income, they reference Milton Friedman. Not sure if you're familiar with Milton Friedman, the Nobel Prize-winning economist. Well, he would be considered a monetarist, and he basically advocated, although he kind of suggested it as a negative income tax, is how he presented it. But it is something that has been talked about and hammered around, even by people that would be normally identified, like Milton Friedman would obviously be identified as more of a free market economist. Now, the thing that he made the argument for, and on the surface I would tend to agree with, and I'm sure a lot of people would, is under the current system that we have now, that basically started, in the 1950s or 60s or around, or probably actually a little beginning iterations, probably in the 40s, but ramping up, especially after World War II, all these social programs and the welfare state, obviously. Now, the argument that Milton Friedman made, that posited the pretense of a negative income tax, or basically something along the lines of a universal basic income, is basically the utilitarian argument, which is to suggest there's so many redundant layers of bureaucracy, and a lot of that bureaucracy is what assumes a massive amount of the capital that goes into these social safety nets or welfare programs, is just by the utility aspect of what's going to be better for the bottom line. Is you can make a pretty good argument, actually, that having a universal basic income would be even more efficient, less costly, less bureaucratic than these kind of quasi-socialist welfare type systems that are currently. And I would actually agree that if you're just a number cruncher kind of a guy, right, you're a pencil pusher, or an accountant, then you could definitely make the case, and I could see how that could definitely be done, where it probably would be, because of the massive waste of spending from governments these days, that you could make the argument, the utilitarian argument, that maybe a universal basic income or a negative income tax may very well prove viable. Of course, my issue that I take with that, and with pretty much all the other, I've heard the utility argument, but usually it's where we find the issue or the discrepancy or the differences is the moral or the ethical stance in terms of anything that has to do with what I say, or whether you want to call it extortion, theft, or forced wealth and income redistribution, is taken from anybody in society, any portion of their productive wealth or their labor, against their will. That's the area. And I've never yet heard anyone, which is hopefully, like I say, we can come to something here where we can get to that point, because that's the part, making a utility argument. Like, I can make the utility argument all day long that if I go steal from my neighbors, I'm going to be much better off, and I can help a lot of people. I can make that argument, and actually it would be 100% legit. If I had a wealthy neighbor, I could take lots of coin from him and spread that around to the community, and I could say that I help people, but it would have been the cause and effect. How did I gain that wealth in the first place, right? And if I deny or ignore the fact that I use theft as the means to the end, well, that's not really how we want societies to properly function, right? So that's just kind of my initial thoughts on the UBI. So if you want, like I say, just kind of give me a little bit of a baseline in terms of what our UBI is, how, and I can just kind of ask you a few questions as we go through it.
Okay. So we can skip over the few things you missed that were bad about welfare and universal basic income. You talked about it being taxation and theft.
Right. Well, we don't have to skip over anything. Like I say, I've got all the time in the world. I put lots of time to. We can take our time, go through anything that you want to cover. This, like I say,
with welfare, what I would like to mention about that is there's many different names of different programs and various things, but pretty much universal with the welfare is there's a means test.
Right.
So in order to have a means test to be meaningful, you need a bureaucratic army to deal with all of the people applications and keep up to it and so forth. In addition to the means test, it essentially forms a barrier to income. So anybody that is receiving welfare and has ambition and wants to do something, wants to work, wants to earn a little extra, That's fine as long as it's just a very little bit. It's fine if it's under the table and they don't get caught. If they are really productive or want to be productive, there's a major this ladder to go up the income scale. You get on the welfare state at the bottom and you take a step or two, and then there's a gap of about 6 rungs that you can't get over. As soon as you get a job that pays more money, it will kick you out of being eligible and you'll end up far worse than you were before. So that is a major negative. Universal basic income doesn't do that. Okay, that's fine. The other thing that is common with both universal basic income and welfare is that all the money that is procured to fund this decreases the reserve of the people who are having it removed from, decreases their ability to provide any kind of charity. Coupled with the fact that the governments involved are taking over this charitable function, people being strapped for cash, and the government's going to do it anyway. They don't want their kids to go without food, so they can give it to charity. So the government's got you covered with that. And then the other thing that is common between both welfare and universal basic income, which is not universal, by the way, because it's limited to the country, that the government that provides it. So it's not really universal. Both of those.
But if it was practiced within a particular state or country, it would be universal within that, though, right?
I'll grant you that point.
Okay.
But here's the point that I'm trying to get to, is that when a government provides a program for the lowest income and provides them with income, you have a country next door, your country across the world that doesn't do that. Their economy is in the crapper. Maybe one of these shithole countries. It provides a major motivation to get their butt to that country that's given away goodies for the baseline, and it just increases immigration problems. Now, don't misunderstand. I'm not. Well, you'll find out later. I am not opposed to immigration. I probably shouldn't have said what I said because
no. That's like I'm coming in.
Misunderstand.
No, but I'm coming into this with no preconceived notions or so I'm just listening to you. So no, and the people in the audience here, they're going to no one's going to be thinking it's what you have to offer. And basically I'm agreeing with you so far in terms of the immigration. I'm not against immigration. So there's chances are we'll probably agree on that aspect because I think I know where you're going with it anyway. So yeah, don't worry about having to set up your defense already. Just, your arguments should be able to speak for themselves.
Okay. Where was I?
Sorry about that. Just that you were talking about like the immigration.
Right. Okay. The government has taken upon itself to provide this for the people that need it. And it depends how you define the reason for this being in existence. We can talk about whether it's a mandate for the government to do it at all, where it points in the Constitution to it or anything like that. But the real reason, let's just take it aside and explain my thinking a little bit. And that is, if you have a problem that you're trying to solve, if you define it, and you will be defining it as soon as you can identify there's a problem, your mind will be putting the particulars to it in a form of a definition. That process of defining the problem by its nature suggests the solution. And if you take your definition of the problem, work it forward in your mind and find out that, oh my God, it either didn't work or it's created many more problems, then you rethink the definition of the problem. And the way I define the need for welfare, universal basic income is related to the concept of entropy. I don't know if you're familiar with what that word is, but basically it's a system whatever its order is at the moment, over time goes to less order. The necktie you have on didn't tie itself. You had to put the energy into that system, and okay. Where I'm going with this is that people, if you consider them to be a system, they're subject to the laws of entropy as well, meaning they will dry up and starve and die, unless there is some input available. And in many stages of life, people have a tendency to start out as little babies and get older and get more capable, and then get older and get less capable. Every one of them is subject to entropy. And the world, the system here, has enough resources to support basically everybody that's alive, because it's actually doing it. So it's not a question of is there enough? It's a question of how it gets divided, how it gets spread around. Now, with a family, the parents know without anybody telling them that they have to feed and clothe the baby, or it'll be a problem. There are many situations, too many actually, where basic resources for survival are really hard to come by, and quality of life is pretty terrible. So recognizing that there is this need that won't go away by itself, we need a system that will make it easier to redistribute the economic productivity and the fruits of that. Government is taking it upon itself to do that because somebody has to do it. The fact that the incentives for these government systems are lined up in the wrong direction, it doesn't seem to matter, particularly with welfare. The way I like to think about welfare and the means testing and the bureaucracy that's required is that the government will take in billions and billions, tens of billions of dollars. And after they get all done with all of their, whatever they do to divide it all up, they ship out hundreds of millions of dollars. And there's a lot of it that's just gone. And I don't think there's any fixing that problem. Universal basic income at least sends a check to everybody. And the ones that are really wealthy, they get taxed more than enough to pay for that and everybody else. So that as an interim would be preferable. But it still doesn't address immigration. It doesn't address the taxation part of it. And then if you're going to, I worked on this for a long time.
Okay.
And I really have a hard time explaining it. The bits and pieces, the parts. Help me out here.
Well, while you're thinking about that, I would just, while you're thinking about that, what I would like to do, I guess, first and foremost, and maybe I should have done that before I even started into it, but it's okay. We can deal with it now because we haven't really got into using too much of the structured terms as of yet. But we definitely want to at least make sure when we're talking about things in terms of government or taxation, like these words and terms that we're throwing around here, right, that we have to at least own up to the fact that there are obviously predefined means to them. Because I've had conversations before. Fortunately, I don't have too many of these people show up, and that's a good thing because that's a waste of time. But some people believe in the subjectivity of everything, that there's no such thing as actual defined meanings, that they can just interpret words to mean whatever they want, which as far as I'm concerned, if you're going to engage, and the fact that we both speak obviously the same language, English, is, and we were taught what words and meanings mean. We know what a dictionary is. We don't. So to me, at the very least, we're both going to at least agree that we're not going to try to create any false meanings to the words. We're going to actually go by the actual defined meanings of the words and terms that we're using, right?
Could you point out where I have done that?
Oh yeah, no, I'm not saying you have as of yet, but when you're talking about government,
okay,
like the thing to me is, because this is where I think a lot of people get very confused when they're hearing these kinds of conversations is, I mean, when you say government, it almost, and some people do talk about it in that way. I'm not suggesting you per se, but just before, like I say, before we get into it, as if it's like some benevolent actor, which government is just a term to describe those who go into politics to become, part of the political system, which has this ability to have a monopoly of force or violence, or to do things that you or I are not allowed to do. So government is basically this pretense that you have people who have an authority to do things that you and I would not be allowed to do. Right?
I'm not in disagreement with that.
Right. So that's the area where I always have the problem, is because to me, it's like I say, the utility, the economic arguments, those are like, and actually because I'm a really big fan of math and stuff, those are fairly easy for me to understand. But like I say, when we're talking about government and any kind of scheme that has to do with distributing wealth, just the same with taxation. Like, some people try to pretend or suggest to me that taxation, well, that's just the price of living in society. Well, I could, like I say, if I had enough people in my neighborhood that could bully a bunch of the other people in the community, I could say, well, that's just the price of living here. You got to give me, I mean, the mafia model, basically the same thing. Hey, if you want to keep your business open, well, you got to give me a chunk. Otherwise, you might find it burnt down tomorrow. Right. So to me, at the very least, when we're talking about government, we're literally talking about force and compulsion. So it's not under the voluntary means, because I mean, I know I've been alive for 50 years. I've never agreed one time for the government. No one's ever asked me my permission to take any portion of my income. But because there's a lot of people in my country that believe in statism, and employers, well, they allow it to happen, because that's, like I say, they have that belief that forced wealth and income redistribution is legitimate, because it's for some concept of the greater good. But to me, once again, you have to get back to the basics, which is, well, if you're taking from someone against their permission, I mean, you can say it's for the greater good, and it may very well be. Like, if someone steals $100 from me and gives $10 to 10 different people, those 10 people would be the greater good than me as the individual. So they've all benefited, each 10 of them, and actually equally. But I was the one that suffered tremendously by the loss of that $100, and that $100, as long as I produced that based on something that I voluntarily created or produced, under my own labor, my own intellect, or whatever I can provide, like, that to me is wholly immoral. I would assume you would agree with that, right?
Oh, I do. And early on, I don't even want to get into how long ago it was, but early on, one of the primary criteria for my formulation of a system was that it had to be voluntary.
Right.
Not only voluntary to get in, but you could voluntarily get out again.
So then it's not going to be government run then, right?
Well, government could, but government's not, and government won't. So no, it isn't.
Well, then I guess that would be my question, is who implements the program? Because they're like, I know what you mean. Like, even when people have made the thing, like, I've heard people when they, especially Marxists, that will say, like, the workers take over the means of production, but not everyone's going to be able to, know how to do the managerial duties or the logistics or shipping. I mean, there's going to be that division, but somebody's going to have to ultimately be in charge, right? That's just no matter what scenario you set up. There's no such thing as like where everybody has an equal voice, because if you've ever tried to run a business where everybody has equal say, in terms, well, you would never get nothing done. Right? So there has to be, there's always, that's the problem, which is the thing I always have the difficult with, is no matter what scenario set up, there's going to have to be a hierarchy somewhere of somebody that's making the decisions. Right now, I'll even admit there are people like Peter Joseph that said, okay, we take that out of the hands of human beings and place it in the hands of computers.
That would be worse.
Right. So, okay. So I'm just, like I say, just for clarifying purposes, so if it's not going to be, because you were kind of saying like that government would implement, but if it's not going to be government, then, like I say, how do you get to where you have this program, this RUBI? Actually, and if you don't mind, what does the actual R stand for? Because the UBI, I would assume.
Well, it had to have a name.
Right.
I wanted the name to reflect UBI, or Universal Basic Income, but I want it to be different. And I don't even know if this is germane or relevant, but at first I started calling it My UBI.
Okay.
All right. Well, I thought, I should do a web search and see what's up with that. Well, son of a gun, there's a charitable outfit with the name of our UBI. and it's like a crypto coin that gets pre-mined. And as soon as I learned that it was pre-mined cryptocurrency, I walked away from that because it's just easier to drop that name. I don't want anything. I don't want to be associated with any pre-mined cryptocurrency.
Oh, okay.
So I call it our Ruby, but that gets to be cumbersome on the tongue. So then I thought, well, what the hell, Ruby? Well, rubies are like jewels and valuable and so forth. So
Okay.
we'll just call the unit of, I don't want to call it money. Let's call it an accounting to begin with. It's difficult to explain a concept when there is nothing like it. And when I said I was the world's foremost expert on the Ruby system, I am, because there is nobody in the world that knows about it.
Right.
So it has a blockchain, and the account is kept on a blockchain.
Okay.
And any individual that breathes air and circulates blood is eligible anywhere on the planet. No race, color, you can't do it for your dog. Okay. Right. You're eligible for one of two types of accounts. One is a business account. We'll get to that later. The one that we want to talk about right now is the individual account. And that comes in two flavors, but they're basically all the same. And let's say you established a Ruby account. You will have your account number, and this does require uniquely identifying you for reasons that will become obvious in a few minutes. There's two channels. It's like the savings account, credit account at your credit union. There's two different branches. Well, there's two with the Ruby system. One is I call the alpha channel, and the other one I call the omega channel. Now, rubies that are dispersed from the alpha channel, and they can only be positive number rubies. It can be 0 or greater for that balance in the alpha account. Whenever a ruby or any part of a ruby is transferred out, either transacted for local currency on an exchange or at the branch bank or whatever, or exchanged for anything else, it's somebody who will say, okay, I'll take your rubies for an old bicycle or new car or whatever. Right. 10% of that amount that's dispersed from the alpha account, the system automatically transfers it to the omega account. The omega account is where the interesting things begin to come. If your account has a 0 balance, if the omega channel of your Ruby account has a 0 balance or greater, you are allowed, if you wish, to set your account to be able to create rubies. Okay, you can create 10 rubies per day, every day. You can create them for the previous 10 days if you haven't created them before, but you can't go back farther than that. So what happens to your account, so you get this account and it's 0, so it's eligible to be a creator of Ruby's account. You say, okay, I'll do that. There's some contracts you have to read before you can do that, and we'll get to that in a minute as well. But when you create these rubies, you get 10 rubies, positive number of rubies in your alpha channel, and your omega channel now shows -10. And you can keep doing this. Basically, you are borrowing rubies from, you're going to pay them back sometime in the future. The contract specifies that because you have created rubies and you have a negative balance, you are pledging that you will run your financial transactions through your Ruby account, through your alpha channel, which means
can I just ask how do you create the rubies? How is this process of creating a ruby? How does that even?
Well, you can fill out like a deposit slip at the bank when you want to take money out of your checking account. If you want to transfer a Bitcoin, You do that on the Bitcoin wallet, and you just say, I want to take 10 rubies out of my Omega channel.
Okay, but
within
I
the
just want, I just want to iterate though with because I understand like when it comes to the cryptocurrencies, how that works is how someone gains access to a Bitcoin to begin with is you have to have servers that complete very complex mathematical calculations, and that is their way of simulating proof of work.
Right.
And just like if you were in the physical world and you went and started digging for silver or gold, once you've done that physical work, you got your shovel or whatever, and you found that. Well, that's how you extract it. Same with Bitcoin. The way they set it up as a cryptocurrency was you had to put in work initially, which was set up buying the servers or whatever. Then you had to have proof of work by actually completing that task. Then you get rewarded. So how that works is it basically translates to like as if the old gold and silver standard where money had tangible value because work was required, right? And
right.
Yeah, and the theory of labor and the price mechanism and all that stuff. Whereas the ruby, I'm just trying to wonder, how does an actual ruby like come from not existing to existing?
That's the magic. And it is magic. And no, I don't envision the cryptocurrency mining and massive amounts of electricity used. It has to have a trust factor as well.
Well, yeah, but with Bitcoin, the trust factor is not even a prerequisite or requirement because it's based on 256 AES encryption technology, and because the ledger is recorded by all transactions, so it means everybody on the blockchain, like everyone that trades in Bitcoin or uses Bitcoin as and the underlying blockchain, everybody gets a copy of the ledger. So even if you and a complete stranger did an economic transaction, I don't get to see what the transaction says, but through the numbers and the algorithm and the encryption method, it gives me a copy of that. And every node, every one of us as individuals along the blockchain gets the exact same duplicate copy. And that's how we know that the transaction actually took place. And it won't be duplicated again. Because if somebody tried to duplicate that transaction, the rest of us would see ho, 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 ho. And all of our computers would recognize automatically that you can't do the same duplicate transaction again, which prevents the potential for counterfeit, which, like I said, I understand the cryptocurrencies, and they're actually a great possible alternative that some of this stuff might be able to take place. But it's the prerequisite. There has to be work, and there has to be a way of measuring that value somewhere. Now, right now, they still haven't, it's still in flux because, not everyone has pivoted to cryptocurrency. So there's still room for error there yet in terms of measuring an actual value. But I don't think the cryptocurrencies have met all the requirements as of yet of having an actual property considered like and deemed as money, because it's still missing a couple of the key factors. Main thing, obviously, the difference between cryptocurrencies and something like gold is because we rely on cryptocurrencies in the digital sphere with the use of electricity. If the power goes down, I'm flat broke. There's not a thing I can do. Whereas at least in the tangible world, the physical world, the gold, no matter what happens, the power goes out, my house burns down, it's still going to exist, right? So that's a problem I still see that the cryptocurrencies are still having to work through. But I still don't know how the ruby gets from being like, I don't know, somewhere like, because I think you are saying it's still kind of blockchain technology that you're referencing here, right?
It is blockchain technology in the fact that the records will be available to anybody anywhere in the world, so that anyone who has at any time in their life created a ruby, that creation transaction can be found. Okay. Now, I don't purport to be a cryptocurrency expert or a blockchain expert or an encryption expert, and you're correct. The blockchain has to be accurate, and it really has to be prevented from forking and double spending and all of those problems. But I'm not the expert there.
Yeah, no, me neither.
Okay. So this, the people that I've explained this to before, one of the things they really want to know is how much is a ruby worth in real money? And that depends on the market. And being global, how much money does anybody need to survive, food, shelter in the poorest of a third world country? So if I said a ruby was $5 and your 10 rubies for the day would be $50, and you're in some godforsaken country, you would be living like a king.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
when this starts, it's going to be utilized primarily by the poorest of the poor, and the rubies, in order to transact, in order to sell a ruby on the market, there has to be somebody willing to buy them, and this is another stumbling block to the system. Now, as it starts in its early stages, the value will be quite low, and the people who are using them will be able to benefit considerably.
Mm.
As the process grows, they will become tradable for larger amounts of money, and I can't make that go away. So the people that are early on and they're creating these to improve their life, when it comes to their turn to pay them back, they're going to have to work harder then than they would have. But hopefully there'll be more resources for them, and they'll have more capability to do it. So hopefully that won't be too much of a hardship. But if it were just a daily allotment for the money, hardly anybody would be wanting to buy them. Why would anybody sitting in a penthouse apartment give a damn about it in the first place?
Mm.
Joe Average, has a job and a car and a house. Why would they even bother?
Mm.
So I had to expand the menu a little bit, and healthcare expenses have been they're government controlled. The private insurance is controlled. The government controls the insurance companies. Single payer, the government controls all of that. And prices have.
No, go ahead. It's okay. I'm just going to actually, let me see if I can just put you back into just you on the screen here, maybe.
No.
There we go. No, wrong one. Shoot, sorry about that. I was trying to get it. I forget how I can do it so I can just put you in the screen. All right, never mind. Go ahead. Sorry about that.
Okay. Where was I? Yes. One of the provisions for the Ruby system is that it will cover your medical expense. Right? I need to take a little bit time to think about what that implies. There'd be no copay, no network, no deductible. Basically what it is the Ruby user is pledging that they will funnel all of their transactions through their Ruby account until whatever rubies they borrowed against their future get paid off. So then you have somebody that's hit with a medical expense, they have no insurance, they have a Ruby account, they activate it, and they say, okay, I need $7,000 because I broke a leg or whatever. Then their paycheck, they redirect their paycheck so that it gets to their regular bank account, to exchange, to buy rubies, to immediately sell the rubies, but they lose 10% to go toward the paying down the Omega channel debt. There is no interest on paying back your own debt in your Omega channel because you owe it to yourself. So there's no other use for the money. There is no due date. There is no overdue. There is nobody come to collect. It's whenever you have yourself in a position where you can have income, you have pledged to run it through the Ruby account. Now,
just before you continue on, because I still have yet to. I'm still trying to figure. I'm following your logic in terms of these transactions, but I still what is set up within this the system? Like what's determining the price mechanism, the value? Because I would suggest you're not. Because if you're talking about rubies, so is there a finite amount of rubies, and how do you figure out price discovery or the actual value per ruby? That would be kind of my
the
question.
Ruby system has no provision for valuing a ruby whatsoever. It's only when the ruby interacts with a local currency through an exchange, and this could be your branch bank. Your branch bank would offer you the service of trading a ruby for whatever local currency is, and they would offer you a rate for it, and you'd either not.
Why would you transfer your ruby to a, because all that's functioning around the world today, unless you're talking about transfer or converting it to gold or silver, but I sure as heck, if there was a ruby or something that had some way of at least retaining it, like why would I want to convert it into, let's say, a Canadian dollar, where it's going to automatically start losing value the minute I've done so? That wouldn't even make one bit of sense. Like, why couldn't I do the transaction with the ruby? Like Bitcoin, I don't have to convert my Bitcoin into Canadian dollars.
Right.
To some stores now, a lot of them they're making it so you have to, but
Okay.
there are some that are, a lot of them that are popping up online now, places like, you know, Amazon and such, that you can actually just purchase things with your cryptocurrencies based on the speculative value that they are at any
If
given
I
time.
understand your question correctly, is why does the Ruby system not allow person-to-person transfer
Yeah.
of rubies?
Yeah.
It does. It does. It absolutely does. Okay. So if you wanted somebody to mow your lawn, you would agree on how many rubies you were going to transact, and bingo, they're done.
Right.
The person who is mowing your lawn is a person who could benefit by creating rubies, and you pay them in rubies. When he or she spends those rubies, there's no consideration, no thought. It's a no-brainer on their part. They don't even have to even know about it. They have repaid based on the amount of rubies they just transferred out. 10% of that went to pay off their Omega channel debt. You don't even have to think about it. The system takes care of that automatically. So it's a good thing to be able to transact directly back and forth.
Yeah.
Businesses, if they hire someone, would have an option of paying the employee in rubies. Well, bingo, there's money, cash flow coming in for their work, for their services, and it sits there in their Alpha account. There's no tax. Ruby system doesn't understand tax. Okay, there is no tax.
Right.
There is a 10% deduction to pay off the previously existing loan. No tax.
Okay.
But when the business gets a Ruby account, the business account has no provision whatsoever to create rubies. All they can do is take them in on accounts receivable and pay them out with accounts payable. And the reason they would want to do that is if they have employees that are likely benefiting from this, it just makes it easier for them to abide by the contract that they signed, that they pledged to do that. If you pay them in cash under the table, part of the contract is there will be audits. The system will determine when a Ruby account, the Omega account, gets way negative and there's nothing made to pay it off. That may trigger an audit, and then it's way too deep into this, but a job posting will be for someone to look into that situation. It may be the person is in terrible straits, you know, who knows? It could also be they're cheating. So the contract says if you are being audited, you pledge to cooperate with the auditor and you pledge not to lie. So the auditor may find that you've actually cheated. The auditor may find that you've lied. The auditor may find that you weren't helpful at all. And if that's the case, any three of those, in fact, even just the one, if you're caught in a lie to the auditor, if you lie, you lose. So the auditor then reports to the, I hate to call it a central committee, but basically flags in the computer so that other people who didn't do the audit look at it to see if it was done properly. And if the audit was done properly, the determination was correctly arrived at, then within 72 hours, that account, and this is the entire punishment, that account loses its ability to create any more rubies. Right. They still have that account. Any money they had, or any rubies they had in the Alpha account, they can spend them. 10% will flip into the Omega account. As long as the Omega account is negative, they can't create any rubies because the flag has been set and they can't unset it until the Omega account gets back up to zero. Once it gets back up to zero, no matter what that user did to trigger it being shut off, he or she can now just say, I want to create rubies again. And I suspect in the beginning, there will be many people that need the money and they don't want to part with their otherwise real cash sheet. And the idea is to catch them early so they don't have a massive debt, so they can work and get paid in rubies or get paid with money and buy rubies to pay off their Omega account debt. And then they can reactivate their account so that if there is a medical emergency, they can cover that. I don't know if you're getting tired of this already.
No, I'm fine. I'm like I said, I'm trying to like follow the logic. The part that I'm still a little bit confused on is the whole thing in terms of how you create a ruby, because that to me is the most important thing. Is how, because what you're doing, you're creating value of some sort, and like I say, how a free market functions, how you measure that value is by sheer fact that, you know, once I produce something. And if you have produced something that we both share that, or at least assume to be of similar value, you know, you could either do the barter exchange, or you could use, like, you know, whether it's cryptocurrencies or fiat currency, and you're just figuring out a way which is just a mathematical calculation. This is worth the same amount as that, and then we make that exchange. But the ruby, and but for that transaction to have taken place, like, I'll just use the old $1 bill for a pencil, but the dollar bill had to be, you know, generated, created, and the pencil had to be generated and created before that transaction can even take place. So my question is, how does the ruby go from, I'm assuming, is it like a digital thing? Is the ruby, we're not talking about anything that's an actual physical, tangible commodity, right?
Correct.
So we're talking about something in the digital realm.
It's an entry in an account.
Okay, so if it's in the digital realm, how does it get created? Like I explained with Bitcoin, how that gets created is there has to be automatic value and labor put into it to derive that value. But I'm just curious how you create.
Okay. Okay. With the Bitcoin, the winner of the contest to hash the block gets an allocation of Bitcoins, which are worth whatever they're worth on the market. We've seen it go way up, way down.
Yeah.
There's no real value to the Bitcoin. It's what other people want to, if they want to buy it, then they'll pay whatever you're willing to sell it for.
Yeah.
Maybe this is answering your question. With the ruby, you don't get the rubies as a reward for mining rubies. Mining can be done much less expensive than the Bitcoin does. You still have to have the truth factor, and I'm aware of that. But hang on, thought slipped out of my head here. It'll come back in a minute.
Sorry.
The value of the ruby. In the case of a Bitcoin, if I don't want to buy your Bitcoin, or not you personally, I'm never going to be forced to buy it. All right. The creator of a ruby has pledged to buy rubies, basically. He has to pay them back. He can't create a new ruby to pay the debt of the ruby that's in the Omega channel. He has to acquire a ruby from somewhere else. So for everybody that has created rubies, those are the buyers.
But that's what I'm trying to get to, though. Who created the rubies in the original way, and how did they create the rubies?
Well, it's kind of like pulling the rabbit out of the hat.
We can't function off of magic. Well, I mean, it's great. It's great as a kid, but trust me, as someone, my brother was really big in magic. It is really great until you've actually learned about the secret behind the magic, and then it's like, poof.
We're getting. I love this. We're getting in way deeper here.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Explain how the U.S. government, I presume the Canadian government, functions basically the same. How do we suddenly have trillions of dollars now when 100 years ago we had millions of dollars or billions of dollars? How did that happen? How did that money get created?
It's called the creation of the central bank, where you can just basically counterfeit money at your wish, rather than they tried it for a little while, which is why they went through the first major crash in the Depression. And then they realized that at the end of it with Nixon is like, you can't play these games without severing the gold standard, because it was playing too much havoc in terms of acknowledging and recognizing the value of actual tangible commodities.
That's because the gold is leaving.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, because gold, you can't magically reproduce gold. You literally have to mine gold, right?
But jump ahead,
Yeah.
and money has been magically created.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But that's why to me, this is the part that actually is where when I want to have the conversation with folks like yourself that do advocate for UBI, or even people I've had this conversation even with people that advocate for minimum wage, because both of them play the same kind of key function. Even if you're talking about the utility aspect of it, is because I'll just use myself as an example. When I started working when I was about 15 years old, that would have been in 1985. Minimum wage at that time was around $4.50 an hour, roughly, and around there. Now, it's tripled since then for basically roughly the same occupation type of work activity, except the cost as a reflection. So everyone that thinks that, we just got to raise, and I've heard them like for the last 20 years or so, or 30 years now, people advocating for this constant increases in the minimum wage. And of course, because you recognize that people are losing because of that government printing of the currency, that they're losing the purchasing power by inflation. Now, as soon as the government steps in to mandate increases in minimum wages, well, then once again, now that's a whole new increase of wealth that the parasites, the central planners, the ones that want to distribute that wealth, well, that's their way of now having a larger share of an even bigger pie. And then all that does is flood the market with this money that's been falsely created out of this speculative wealth, because they're just printing it. And then the prices of all the things that we need or we consume keep increasing to the point that it massively outstrips our purchasing power or the dollars that we use. Now, they've tried to offset that in some degree with globalization by using slave labor from foreign countries that basically treat their people like chattel, right? Now that has shown a decrease in cost or expenditure in terms of some of the things that we get imported from China. But if you think about the actual staples that we need, like the roof over our head, the food in our belly, and the gas in their tank, or the natural gas to heat the home, all of those costs, well, I mean, now with the oil prices going through, like the cartels messing with them, it's dropped now. But we see how that's all outstripped wages. And what it is, every time the minimum wage gets increased, well, now you just see all that more money where they're going to increase the price. So a price of bread, when I was making $4.50 an hour, was, X amount, let's say 69 cents a loaf. Now, even if you're making $20 an hour, well, that bread actually is not only gone up by that 3 times more, it's actually maybe 3.5 times. So I've actually lost all that purchasing power, even though my wages look like they've increased. If the price of everything through the cost of inflation is reflective of that, then I'm like the dog chasing his tail, right?
No, I hear what you're saying.
So anything, I guess what I'm saying is anything that can be produced without proof of work or without actual, tangible, whether it's an idea that you create and you become an entrepreneur and you innovate or whatever, or some physical labor you do, without something like that backing it up, then once again, then you just do get in this point where the government can just, or whoever it is, or whatever Ponzi scheme they set up, where they can constantly keep outstripping. And even though it feels good, like when you tell a young person today, it feels good, sounds good. Oh, you mean you get $20 an hour to do something you used to get $5 an hour? But if you, like I say, if you took them back to that time and showed them how much the cost of everything else that you purchased is, actually in 1985, I had just as much purchasing power, probably a little bit more than I do today, making, like I say, $20 an hour.
Do we want to get into fiduciary money?
Well, see, this is what I mean. To me,
different.
What I would say, which is why even early on when I say like we should offer the defined meaning to the words. So to me, there is real money. Like I know there's lots of things that governments and central banks like to call money, but that's not money. Right? To me, real money has to have 3 main functions. It has to be a medium to measure value. Right. So if it's something I produce as the fruits of my labor or my intellect, like as an entrepreneur or something that I've created as from my thought processes that I can translate into the real world. And it has so it has to be able to measure that value. Then it has to be a medium to exchange that value. And the third contributing factor that is required for it to be deemed genuine money is to be able to retain that value for future use. Those are the three key requirements. And as we see, that's not what happens under modern fiat currencies that are severed away from anything where you actually have to produce real work or proof of work to, keep that value in check. On the free market, the prices of everything can fluctuate, but it only happens based on voluntary exchange. Whereas if the government can print money and doesn't have to have any proof of work, well, as with everything, the old law of supply and demand, if I could just produce, a gazillion things without any added expenditure or cost, well, it's automatically going to decrease the value of that, which means it's not real money because it's actually destroying it. It's not giving this ability to save that for a future use, right?
Not disagreeing with what you said.
Right.
You're familiar, I'm sure, with fractional reserve banking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Very much against all that. Yeah.
There's your blinder right there.
Yeah. I definitely don't go for if you only have so much in the vaults that you should be able to lend out more than you actually have.
That practice is ancient.
Oh, I know it is. I know.
Ancient, and it's not anything that you can stop.
Well, you can.
If you could stop it, it would have been stopped a long time ago.
Well, because there's a lot of people that like being able to do that. So, and they're usually the ones that take over the helm of controlling the money supply.
It's a definition of a problem again.
Yeah.
If you define the problem as money is being created by fractional reserve lending, which, in case any of your listeners don't really know what that is that the bank will lend money against the value of a tangible item, a car, a house, or whatnot. The money comes to the borrower in the form of a check, which is made out or turned over to the car dealer or the owner of the house you buy, and it goes back into the bank again. So at the end of that transaction, the bank has, and when I say the bank, I don't mean the exact same bank, but the bank system. Mm-hmm. When that check went out to buy the car, to buy the house, it goes back into the banking system. So that amount of asset money is exactly the same. But after the transaction, the bank or one of the banks has a certificate that says they can sell your house or sell your car. That is an asset for the bank as well. So now the bank, instead of having this much asset, has this much assets on their books. And when they have more assets or more reserves, then they're able to lend out a larger amount of money. And when you consider over the whole banking system, the money gets lent out, redeposited, lent out to somebody else for something else. And again, you end up with this amount of money, which is credit money, fiduciary money. Now, here's the thing with the fiduciary money. Like I said, you can legislate it to be gone, but you can't get rid of it. People are always going to be able to lend money more than they have.
Not really. Not without government. Like, I don't know how I could possibly lend out more money than I have without if I didn't have government to back me up, or like an army of police officers or enforcers to make everyone have to agree to that arrangement. It'd be really hard for me to convince anyone that I only got $1,000 in the bank, but I'll lend out $10,000 or $1 million.
Well, it doesn't work exactly that way.
Well, that's what fractional reserve is you only have a fraction of the reserve. So if you got $1 million fractional reserve, and they started out, lower levels, maybe only 9 times that amount. But now, as we're seeing, they've gone up to double, triple, like 20 plus 30 times that amount or more in terms of how much they're lending out, which is why all these bank runs.
Well, they've been required to have somewhere in the teen percentage for reserve. So just for easy figuring, if it's 10% reserve, then they can lend out for every dollar, they can lend out $10.
Right.
So
but that's under that system, which is why the bank runs happened and why the banks all basically crashed and had to be recapitalized, which taxpayers had to once again be forced to bail them out. Because
the word taxpayers, they were forced.
Sorry, go ahead.
governments, but the banks didn't need to be bailed out. The ones that failed, if a bank failed, then its assets are still there. There's still the mortgage on the house, and those assets can be sold to a bank that's better managed and actually end up better for the depositors and the borrowers. But that's not what happened.
No, but I'm saying if a bank lent out. Oh, sorry, we cut each other off there for a sec. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, try not to do that.
Oh no, it's okay. No, it's all right.
Try not to.
Oh no, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Anyway, so basically what, like I was saying is, and what happened, obviously, you know, like in Black Friday or different times in the past where, yeah, the people, you know, got scared or spooked, and a lot of them went to take their deposits out of the bank. And because the banks do function under that fractional reserve, if you pull out all your deposit, and let's say all those deposits combined, you know, $10 million, but, you know, the bank is, you know, lent out $100 million, then there's not actual, there isn't, you can't get your money back. So if you're one of those person that put your money deposit in the bank and you want it back and the bank doesn't have it, well, how are you going to get it back when they don't actually have it? Now, I guess you could say that you could take over someone's house that they lent it out, but the fact that that bank printed magic numbers on a screen and pretended that was tangible money, like that is already more of that's magician work too, right?
Right.
Whereas you can where you're basically just pretending that there's money there when in reality there's not, which has caused a lot of people to be very disenfranchised with the banking system because you can't trust them by sheer fact that they're constantly finding ways to destroy your purchasing power and remove your ability to hold them accountable.
Okay. Now, we get back to defining the problem.
Mm-hmm.
If you define the problem that credit money exists.
That what exists? Sorry.
Credit money.
Okay.
Okay. The pyramided money. Okay. Yeah. The money that's not really backed by anything except that we hold this item. There are some things that are a problem with that.
Yeah.
Granted, the one you just went through is obvious.
Yeah.
The other problem is the banks. I want to back up just a bit. With the treasury bonds that get sold to the buyers, those are the banks that buy them at a discount, and that's the interest rate is the discount. Then they sell those bulk to the Federal Reserve, and they don't actually get the cash in their pocket back. They had to pay some cash out, but the value of those bonds that the Federal Reserve bought gets credited to the bank's reserve account. So if they buy $1 million of bonds, they get $1 million of reserve credit, and that legally allows them to lend out $10 million of loans. Mm-hmm. You do the math on the interest rates on that, and you'll say, no wonder they're donating hospital wings and God knows what, but the problem is, as the loan gets paid back, if you amortize the loan, every payment, the amount of interest goes down and the amount of principal goes up. So as that loan gets paid back, it neutralizes the debt. So does that ring a bell with the Omega channel?
I'm still trying to get through, because we were talking about the fractional reserve bank. I'm still trying to get through how you can, like I say, you should at least recognize the inflationary aspect of once again, whether it's printing money, you know, by way of, you know, calling up and say, hey, you know, we buying $1 billion worth of government bonds and print it through the treasury, or you're just a private bank that has this fractional reserve, because all this added money is going out into the economy that's not backed by anything. That's another inflationary aspect that's, you know, it's detrimental to the poor. Yeah, like I say, in any scheme, there's going to be benefactors from that, right? So the people that are getting that counterfeited money, or that money that's based on a nothing, like, they're definitely benefiting. There's definitely going to be people that are going to be really happy about the fact that they got to take advantage of that. But it has that secondary aspect that it's causing inflation or harm, economic harm. And it's usually, well, it's always the people at the lower end of the social economic scale that suffer the harm of inflation.
Right there.
Right.
Yes. Put an exclamation point after that last statement that you made. Absolutely.
Okay.
Now, where was I? As the loan gets paid off, the credit money volume shrinks. That should cause deflation, right? Prices should go down because there's not as much money chasing the same amount of goods.
Well, you would think that, but if you're one of those people that realize that a fractional reserve system is in play, then, if there would be some actors that would see that as a deflationary if once again, everybody paid back their loans. But
Right.
because that's not really what happens in the real world, is people would take advantage of the fact, well, then, hey, let's print as much of this. I mean, if there's no restrictions to it and fractional reserve banking is allowable, right? Then the minute it does go into depreciatory or deflationary aspects, then the people that don't like deflation, and there are people that don't like deflation, are going to do whatever they can to counter that, right? So now they're going to or lend out larger sums of money.
Bingo.
Right.
You said it. Not only do they have to lend out larger amounts of money, they have to create more loans, which means they go beyond their reserve requirement, which gets them into, we're insolvent territory. But who are they going to lend it to? Let's say we start with a pristine system, and who borrows the money from the banks? Well, not the poor people. You can't pay it back. The banks loan to the rich people, and they want to build factories, and they want to build skyscrapers, and they want to do all kinds of things. So they borrow this money because they're rich, and they do really well, and they pay it back, and that's the problem.
Oh yeah, no doubt. But there's definitely lots of poor people that love to borrow from the banks too.
No, the banks don't want to loan to poor people because
they don't necessarily want to, but they will, right? And poor people get themselves into some pretty precarious situations. I know, because there's a lot of
issue. I don't want to go there yet. Or ever for that.
But actually, that's the thing. Actually, I think we're kind of even getting further away from this whole UBI or Ruby thing, because now we're talking about the current system, which I don't think either of us would be advocating for.
My point.
I don't think that you would agree that this system that we're currently functioning under is anything remotely resembling fair or equitable.
I'm bingo. I'm in agreement there. But here's my point. My point is how you define the problem.
Right.
You seem to be defining the problem as the creation of debt money.
Yeah.
Okay. Creation of debt money can be a problem. The current way it's done, the problems show up in the economy in general when they run out of credible borrowers. Then the amount of money in the system begins to shrink. And it makes it harder for people who owe money to pay it back because their money is becoming worth more. They have to work harder to get it. So the incentive is to maintain their income, to keep the lights on, they have to put out more loans. And since the good class of borrowers that don't really need it and have lots of money they don't want to do it right now. So then they have to go down to the second tier of borrowers. And this just becomes a rinse and repeat thing until you end up with what happened in the last decade and basically what's happening again. The system is flawed because, and this is the point I want to make, is that the new money that gets injected into the economy gets injected at the top end through the banking system, through the Federal Reserve, and it's debt money. And the devil is to pay is when the loans get paid off to begin with, increases more loaning to increase the debt money, which is shrinking, and their interest is shrinking. So they loan shakier and shakier loans, which begin to default. And when a default happens, instead of being incrementally decreasing the debt money, it goes bang, that piece is gone. Then they're in a shit world of trouble. And this is why the banks have to be bailed out. This system is bad. But to say that it is the debt money that's bad it doesn't follow. Because what I'm doing is I'm taking the idea of debt money and I'm letting people at the very bottom create debt money. And they're pledging, as they get older, as they get smarter, to work and earn, buy the rubies at the current price, which is likely going to be higher, to pay that off. Now, with the ruby system and the creation of debt, it's a fact of life that there will always be poor people. There will always be people at the low end of the totem pole. There will always be people that need assistance through no fault of their own, sometimes through fault of their own, but we're not even going to talk about that.
Right.
Then when you get into the creation of debt to pay medical expenses, with the Ruby system, you wouldn't need to have insurance. You could just take your insurance premiums for the year and keep it. Well, fine. The problem with that is if you have your Ruby account
Mm-hmm.
and you're spending money out of your Ruby account, 10% of the Alpha account spending goes into the Omega account.
Mm-hmm.
If you have no debt in your Omega account, you have a positive number in your Omega account, it can be positive. You can spend that too, just as you could from the Alpha. And just like with the Alpha channel, the Omega channel, when its money, positive money is spent, 10% of that goes to Omega Central. Omega Central is a big holding tank of debt, and you're paying down the debt from somebody, say, that died and can't pay it back, somebody that cheated and is not going to pay it back. So 10% of the Omega money basically goes to pay down the debt. But that's at a 10% from the Omega channel. But if you realize that the Omega channel is funded by 10% of the Alpha channel, anybody using a Ruby account on a positive basis, say a business that's taking it for accounts receivable, paying wages, paying accounts payable, they end up losing 1% of that to Omega Central, which goes to pay down the general overall debt, because we know not any person that creates this is going to be able to pay it. Now,
See, I'm just wondering, like, this seems like a little bit overly, because to me, I mean, the thing that would make that most simple, because obviously, debt's going to have to be incurred by people. And I have actually, I take absolutely no issue with having like a banking type of system or any kind of methodology for people who have, whether you're talking about rubies or Bitcoin or dollars or anything. If I let's perfect example, if I have 1,000 Canadian dollars and I don't need that for today, if I want to lend it out to, $100 each to, 10 people that are of low socioeconomic means, and they want to use that money to maybe go buy some groceries as a consequence of that interaction or transaction economically, interest would be the get back the principal. And because I was out that $1,000 for that particular time frame, the interest is the added cost that I would have to layer on that, because they may not pay it back. It's a certain amount of time frame that I now don't have that $1,000. So it's just that added little bit. So I'm all for the normal, like in terms of debt.
totally.
But that debt, as far as I'm concerned, that has to be based off of something that was produced, because I actually did something. So if I have that money and I didn't just, print it in a screen, then it changes. It affects my entire psychology and my incentives in terms of who I would be willing to trade or to lend that money to. It causes a tremendous amount of internal calculations that greatly affects how that plays out, and it happens in a more ethical and a more not just ethical, but a reciprocal manner that I can make sure I can hold that other person to account. So in the contract, I'd make sure, okay, if you don't pay me that $100 back, maybe I'm going to need some collateral just to make sure that so I'm all for all that. But my problem is when you get to this thing where whether you're creating rubies or anything, or even fiat currency dollars, is if you're creating them out of nothing or nowhere, then like I say, you're just by natural, the way economics works or supply and demand is by creating thing without backing it up with anything, you're actually devaluing it even further. So whoever does get that, or is a recipient or a benefactor of that money, is they're actually getting it at a reduced purchasing power. So they're losing, like even in the fiat currencies today, because inflation is higher than how the money is valued now. Even if you had a 2% or a 1% savings rate on your bank, you're still losing out because the cost of everything else has gone up by a whole lot more than 2%. Now, I know the central banks try to play this game that, inflation is only 2%, but that's because they stripped so many things out of their core measurements that basically you can make it whatever you want. And they use the excuse, we can't include fuel, we can't include housing because they're too volatile. Well, those are the things, like I say, that actually we require to thrive and survive. I can live without the cheap stuff at the dollar store, but I need that roof over my head. I need that food in my belly, right? So, and the heat, in the wintertime, especially here in Canada, could get quite brutal. So it's the fact that you're constantly devaluing these things. If anything that's created from nothing has that automatic attributing factor that is going to devalue it in some way. That's my concern. And like I say, rich people, they don't care because, if you can print all that money into a screen, it's the benefactor or the recipient or the person that's taking out a loan or that's using the ruby or anything that can be debased in such a fiat type manner. Those are the people that I would be concerned about the most. The ones that are on the higher end of it, they'll figure a way to play their little games as they do, as it is, right?
I am not disagreeing with anything that you've said. And I would like to take a moment just to thank you for having this conversation in the first place.
Not a problem.
Because the questions, the statements are extremely insightful. They will help everybody that's listening.
Yep, for sure.
I have a quick question.
Yep.
You just went to the bank and borrowed $1,000 Canadian, correct?
Right.
Well, can you tell me? I know this was figurative, but you said this earlier in this little.
Yeah.
Okay, you borrowed $1,000. Can you tell me?
Well, actually, I would have said that how I would have set it up. Like if I had the $1,000, it wasn't because I borrowed it, because I had $1,000. So let's say I went out and worked, for
okay,
a week, and I had that extra $1,000, and after I paid my bills off, and I've actually done this, right? I got my bills paid off. I'm okay. I can make it through the next paycheck, no problem, because the house payment doesn't come out till whatever, right? And if I have that extra $1,000, I could lend it out and not be too bad off as a consequence of the result. But I at least got gained or earned that money in some way, which, like I say, but if I stole it from someone, it changes my incentive or my measuring and my calculations, because I'm now not thinking of it as the value. Like I say, if I had to put in, 40, 50 hours of construction work, which I've done many weeks in my life, that changes the whole measurement and the calculations in terms of not just who I'd be willing to lend it out to, but, if there'd be a rate of return, if I would need some kind of collateral on the side of it. It changes the human psychology. And really, to me, at the end of the day, just like when we're raising kids, when you're talking about societies or any structures where you have large groups of people, it comes down to me as a libertarian is proper incentive that functions under the voluntary means without having to use force or violence or coercion or theft. Because to me, it's the ethics and the morality, not just the utility argument, that matters. And that's actually how you get even anything remotely resembling a free, prosperous society that you would actually want to live in, is you got to be at least have morals and ethics placed at the forefront, whether you're talking about social engagements or economic. And the economic argument, like I say, once you have an actual tangible value that's placed on a person's labor or their intellect, that's something that, like I say, it's going to incentivize them to want to do the right thing. And I don't have to rely on their benevolence. It's just that they're automatically incentivized. Whereas if it's just something that I can, like I say, just type numbers into a screen and create it, well, now my incentive structure has dramatically changed. And that's really hard to gauge or measure. Plus, even when you're talking about the value of whatever that's going to be on the other side, it's going to be really hard to gauge or measure that too. A perfect example with that would be, like, just to make it as clear as possible so there's no confusion, is if I have, if I'm selling Canadian Libertarian cups and I say I want $1 for it. Well, if someone voluntarily chooses to come and they give me $1 and I give them the coffee, so we both walked away from that transaction. Obviously, we wanted to do it because we chose to do it voluntarily, and we both feel equally that there was a reciprocal. I gained what I assume the same amount of value in terms of the dollar. They assume that they gain the same amount of value in terms of a cup that they can now use to drink out of, day in and day out. Whereas, like I say, if I can use theft or just print something, right, then now that has changed the entire equation entirely. Like if I said, you have to buy this cup off me, right? And I'm the only one that's making the cup or whatever excuse I want to use it. I can charge whatever the hell I want want for it at that point in time. Or I could say, I'll give you this, or I'll sell you this cup for $10. Is it really worth $10? I don't know, because if it's not a voluntary thing where we can figure out how much labor that you went in to get, like, so that person that gave me that dollar, they're going to make that measurement based on whatever they had to produce to gain that dollar, right? Whereas if this money can be just created anywhere, there's no cost and there's no price mechanism. There's no actual way for each of us to value what. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Talking about we'll get back to the $1,000 loan at the bank, but that's for right now. Let's go back to the coffee cup and the price of the coffee cup.
Okay.
Maybe I didn't understand the words that you were saying correctly, but you were saying that the value of the coffee depended on his labor that goes into earning the money to buy the coffee.
Right. Yeah. That's the calculation that people make. Right?
Our first issue.
Because they know how much that's how even without any central planner, and before there was even such thing as central banks, and before there was anything even remotely resembling like a global marketplace, that was how it was quite easy for humans, like I say, without any force or coercion. And even back in the day, let's say you were using the tally stick, or you were using tulips in the Netherlands. Based, what it is you can use anything as a means to measure, exchange, or retain that value. But the person, or how that transaction takes place, is everyone that's involved in that transaction knows what kind of productivity or work or labor that went into it to produce, like I say. So whether they're using whatever the medium of exchange they're using, but the fact that the medium of exchange isn't something that could be manipulated or just artificial, like there's no replicator to just make it so that you can just do whatever the hell you want with it. Otherwise, people, like I say, there would be no way of measuring that value. The fact that someone would be willing to pay $1 but not $10 is because they recognize that if they had to work an entire day, right, and I only took about a half hour to make that coffee cup, they would recognize automatically that there's a mismatch. There's an imbalance in terms of the valuation that we're placing on our goods or our productivity or our labor. That's kind of where I'm going with that. Is the beauty of the freedom of exchange in a free market, just like Adam Smith said with the invisible hand, is not even that there doesn't even have to be any central planner. The price mechanism works perfectly just by sheer fact that we get to make that measurement, that calculation in our mind, and decide voluntarily whether we're willing to do so. Which is why some people, like, you could be a really, really rich guy with billions of dollars, and you might pay, $10 million for a piece of art that looks like a kid threw some paint on the wall. Right? All right, you do your thing, but you're making that calculation once again based on your spec. But it's only going to happen voluntarily. If someone could force you to pay that for the painting, then now you've changed the mental, psychological, and the price mechanism. All those calculations go out the window. Which I don't know how humans function without having incentive or any kind of structure and environment to measure value.
Okay.
Sorry, I know I went along a little bit of a tear there.
No, that's okay. That's okay. You're making your point extremely clear.
Okay.
You basically have a situation where money derives its value from the work that went into it. And this is going to be an issue, and we're in disagreement on that, and it's actually rather way aside of the point. I will say that it looks as though prices are determined by the amount of labor that goes into the product or service. It certainly looks that way, but value is subjective, and what something is worth to one person has no bearing on what the same thing is worth to somebody else. So the whole price finding thing, we're on the same page, and it's rather a picky point about the amount of labor. I mean, I can spend 40 hours painting a piece of shit painting, and nobody would pay me for it. Well, God damn it, I work 40 hours. I want 40 hours pay for my piece of shit painting. Well, no, it doesn't work that way. Yeah. On the other hand, if I am, name me a big painter, I don't know. Their names all escape me. And I take the paint and brush it, smash it on the wall, and that's $7 million for 2 seconds work. Well, it's not amount of the labor that goes in it. But we'll move on. Can we go back to after you talk?
No, but in a way it is, because the person that's on the other side of that transaction, like, you might have put in an hour or 10 minutes, but if that person, like I say, Van Gogh, even in maybe 10, or I wouldn't say 10 minutes, let's say in an hour, Van Gogh could create a painting that's, amazing. And most people wouldn't even be able to do that, even if they put 1,000 hours into it. Right. So I get the speculative and subjective value in terms of that kind of stuff. But that, once again, when we're using art, that is more aligned with, it is totally like, do you like blue or red? So there is a lot more speculation involved with that.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the labor. But if it's voluntarily, you've already admitted, like if they're charging $1 million for that painting, for me to buy it, that means I am making a mental calculation of whatever I had to do. Like I say, not just labor. When I say labor, I don't just mean like physical, tangible labor. It could be also a product of your intellect, because a lot of people are right. Very wealthy, but they don't actually have to do physical work, but they come up with ideas, or they're entrepreneurs that construct entire business models that would have never happened without their brain. So I'm all for paying and compensating people based on not just what they do, like physical labor, but I mean even the labor of your intellect, which is it's still labor. It's just that it can happen, obviously in a much quicker time frame, and because there's a varying levels in people's intellect and their capability or their creativity, their artistic, acumen, is, yes, that's all going to be speculative, but it's all still going to be balanced and based on the fact that somebody is making a measure, a measurement or a calculation in terms of, is it worth it? Right. That, to me, that's the major thing, is the price mechanism in the free market. The sheer fact that exchange happened voluntarily means that both persons on either side of that equation had to make that determination in their mind and make that calculation. Is it worth it? Whereas if something can be created out of nowhere without any prior work going into it at all. Oh, sorry. What was that? Was that you or me?
Yeah, it was just a message coming through, but
Oh, okay, no worries. But anyways, that's my only concern. So I'll just let you kind of go with that, because like that's my biggest thing that I'm getting around here is if something can be created from nothing, then how do you get price discovery or that mechanism that humans require to determine what its value is worth?
Well, let's take it up from there. But to go forward with this, let's go back to where you said that you were okay with either you going or somebody going to a bank and getting a loan for $1,000 and paying interest and so forth. Okay, that was a different $1,000. Now, here's my question: is the $1,000 that you or this other person just borrowed from the bank, is that real base money or is that debt money?
Well, see, that's what I mean. It would have to be, if you're talking about a bank under proper free market environment, if that bank is lending out money or $1,000, they have to have actual $1,000 of deposits from depositors that actually chose to put money. Because proper banking was originally, the concept of proper banking was people that just didn't want to stash their money under their pillows or their mattresses, right? And they heard about these institutions that will take their money, store them in a very safe vault, protect their assets. And then that bank, as a consequence of that, could turn around and lend that money out to other people in the community or businesses, which to me, I'm all for. I think it's a beautiful, I think banking is actually a very beneficial thing for most human beings. It's the fractional reserve. It's the fact that they're lending out money that's actually not based on anything. That's where, like I say, and that's where you're getting outside that realm of what the value of it would be worth. Because if you can just increase it just arbitrarily, now you're messing with the actual value of it. And not to mention the other consequence of that is, like I said, then you have the situation where you can have bank runs, right? Where people are like, what if I want my money back? What if there's in a particular area, there was a major flood and a lot of the depositors that had their money put into the bank, well, what if they wanted to pull that money out because, now they got to rebuild their homes or do whatever they got to do, or upgrades, or rent really expensive excavators or equipment to, dig out the trenches so that they don't have to worry about flooding in the future, whatever it is. But the money that should be lent out from a bank, it should be still based on actual depositors' money that actually was produced based on actual work or creativity or something had to, happen to actually create that value in the first place.
Okay. I see the issue that we have here. The world that you just described hasn't existed for decades.
Yeah, I know. The bankers know how to play these games.
Created.
Yeah.
Let me tell you a little personal story about what this has created. Grew up on a farm, small farm, and my father liked chickens, and that was one of the things he did to provide for us. All else fails, we could eat eggs, we could eat chickens.
Yep.
He raised quite a lot of chickens. Didn't have the financial resources to just buy the chickens and buy the feed and then wait for them to grow up or wait for them to grow old enough to lay eggs. So he would do contract growing. He took care of the chickens. He built the barns. He maintained the barns. He got paid on a square foot.
Nice.
And the company that owned the chickens and bought the feed would put in whatever chicken he put in. And he did. He worked hard. He took good care of them.
Right on.
And then along comes the opportunity through a federal loan program to farmers to expand. Oh,
Yeah.
never mind that.
That's okay.
So he was a good farmer. He managed this. He borrowed money. He built another chicken house, and he made more money. Everything was fine. But he ended up making the loan payments, making the interest payments on the loan, working a hell of a lot harder because he doubled or tripled the square footage of his work. Okay. Well, what was happening is the banking system, in cahoots with the government guaranteed loan, were loaning money up and down the road, all across the county, all across the state, pretty much all across the country, as if they were a bottomless pit of money. So many farmers says, gee, we either got to get big or get out, borrowed the money, worked harder, paid the bankers, ended up with sore backs and no more money than they had before. So yeah, this is the system that we have. And sure, it fed more people. What's happened with agriculture is the crop farmers, wheat, corn, they have to buy fertilizer. They have to get production loans to be able to buy the fuel and the tractors to till the fields and the fertilizer to put on to grow. And with the fertilizers, plants grow really fast, but they outgrow the ability of the microbes in the soil to break down the rocks to produce minerals for them. Right. So that the soils are getting depleted. The food that gets harvested from this gets hauled off. So what minerals were there that the microbes broke out gets hauled off and is not put back on the land. So over years, we end up with more farmers, more machinery, more commercial fertilizer, more food, but less nutrition, and the land becomes less and less able to support this. And this I attribute to not just fractional reserve banking, but government guaranteed loans, so the bankers couldn't lose.
Right.
The problem is conflating debt money with the way that it is created and injected at the top of the economic strata. The people who get the money first are able to buy the production means while prices are still lower. Yep. And then as that money filters into the system, it trickles down eventually so that the farmers get to have this. But by then, the prices of the goods have gone up. So they lose.
Exactly.
Now, so what I have done is I have severed the debt money from the delivery mechanism. It's the government, it's the banks, it's the central banks that back up the banks, and their delivery mechanism of the money that is newly created to the top of the food chain. What I've done is I've taken the debt money and I put it at the bottom, the very, very bottom of the food chain. Now, would you take an IOU from somebody who's 12 years old and has a crippled arm for whatever amount of money you want? And that you're taking an IOU from that person and saying, excuse me, I need a drink of water here.
Yeah, no problem. As soon as you're done actually with this explainer, what I think I want to do, because I had some questions set up to ask you, and then just after you do that, I just want to maybe run through them, because I think if I go run through those questions, I can at least answer, and then of course the people that are watching the stream can kind of get a better understanding, because there's a few things I want to make sure that I'm clear on, and like I say, I had some of those questions already put up for that, so if you don't mind.
So we get back to the crippled 12-year-old boy.
Yep.
And he needs some money to buy food or whatever. Would you take an IOU for him to you directly, that when he gets older and bigger, that he'll pay you back?
Of course, that would completely depend on a multitude of things. That's why, as a libertarian, obviously, I want to deal with people as individuals, not based on any other descriptors of their, like you're saying, he could be crippled or have an arm.
Mhm.
I mean, you could also use like, oh, he's black and comes from a really poor
Whatever you would like to.
yeah,
Okay.
because to me, none of those qualifiers, like to me, it's because at the end of the day, it's an economic exchange. Now, personally, as an individual, if I knew the person and they were local from the community, raised well by, good parents, and something happened that was unfortunate, rather than even just land, I might very well just out of generosity, I may very well just offer to help that person. And as a consequence, say, hey, maybe you're ever up to it, I wouldn't mind if you come up, cut my grass a couple of times, or there'd be all kinds of things like that. But that would all be, in terms of anything that has to do with voluntary exchange, and whether it's charitable or whether you want to do it as a loan type of thing. To me, it's the qualifiers of whether he's handicapped or not, because he could be a handicapped little shit disturber for all I know, right? Not suggesting that the chances are, the probability would be quite low, but if I don't know the person individually, I can't just based on a speculative some contributing or attributing factor to the person's physical capabilities, I can't make that valuation. That's why, like I say, that's the beauty of a free market environment. People transact and engage in voluntarily and based on things that are actual tangible value and worth that we all hold dear and near, because we've had to produce intellect or labor into it. Is those calculations happen in real time, and you make them, and like I say, they work out to be actually very ethical, just by sheer fact that both people on either side of that equation want to make sure they're not getting ripped off, manipulated, or having their value of whatever they produce. So that's the beauty of the free market that, like I say, I think would perfectly function. And I get you were even saying that this Ruby is voluntary, but I'm still trying to get to, if it's voluntary. So is it going to be something almost like a blockchain? So instead of it calling it Bitcoin, are you talking about something that's like blockchain based, but people can voluntarily choose to opt in? But so my thing would be then, okay, if that's because to me, anything that's voluntary, no matter what it is, even if it's a voluntary Ponzi scheme, right? Right now it's voluntary if you want to play on the stock market, right? It's completely voluntary whether you choose to invest in the stock market or not. Personally, I think it's a big giant casino at this point in time, right? But if you want to, now there's underlying aspects of the market that's not the casino aspect of it. I get that. But the valuations, as we see, it's so based that on things that aren't grounded on fundamentals. It's just like I say, Ponzi schemers keep finding up multiple layers, right? And actually that's the thing. It gets more confusing over time, which is kind of why I was appreciative of things like cryptocurrency such as Bitcoin, is because it's quite simple for most humans to understand. Is you have to produce something of value in order to actually receive that value. So, proof of work in terms of mining for Bitcoin. Same with gold or silver, when it was always part or considered actual money, is you couldn't just go out and print money, or print silver or gold. There had to be. So all those things, like I say, are beautiful function of the market. I'm just wondering though, if this thing you're setting up, if it's voluntary, is it basically like because you even said it goes to a central, sorry. Okay. Yeah. Because see, with Bitcoin, there is no, it does, because there's another attributing factor to money that people really appreciate. Now, even with fiat currencies, one of the things that fiat currencies come with, rather than have to use credit or online digital currencies, is even though that fiat currency is definitely being eroded, the value on a regular basis, but you can still make exchange, absent of the prying eyes of people that you don't want to see, that exchange. Whereas if something like Bitcoin has a ledger, but it's anonymized in terms of the end user. Now, the actual information is not anonymized, so everybody gets that same ledger, but they don't get to see actually who's making that transaction. So once again, it allows for people to make transactions without other people, peering their eyes or over their shoulders and watching what they're doing, because privacy has to be something and is important too, because we recognize people in government or even thieves or criminals, anything where people can use to track and trace your economic transactions. There's always room for people that use that as for nefarious reasons or with ill intent, right? So I guess my thing is with your Ruby, I guess the question I'm trying to get to is, if it's based on a blockchain type of technology, why would you want to have, if there's something that's centralized anywhere to it, then I would imagine it's going to end up that because somebody's going to have access to it, from what you're saying, right? Because or that's the other thing. If this 10% is going into this other pile, who has access? Because if we all have unfettered access to it, well, that's like leaving the bank vault wide open and hoping nobody will, go in with take a mad dash and grab the cash, right? So I don't know. I'm still trying to function through that. And because that to me is the most important thing. I want to hear you explain in terms of how this, because I'm still functioning through. I think I kind of get where you're going with it. It's just that how does it actually function in the real world?
Excellent. I will admit that I was confused during that a little bit.
Okay, sorry.
No, that's okay. The problem I'm having right now is I've got about 4 things that really need to be addressed to clear up.
Okay.
When you said Bitcoin proof of work creates the value of a Bitcoin, then tell me how it could go from $18,000 to $7,000.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. It's not stable.
Less?
Sorry, go ahead. What?
Did the work that went into mining the Bitcoins cost less?
Well, see, that's the area which is why I don't do the exchanging. Like, I have had people donate Bitcoin for me, but I don't get into the exchanging because I think that's just another kind of with the exchange in terms of manipulating the value and dictating what it's worth does have issues. Like, to me, that's why I don't think any of these Ethereum and Bitcoin, may very well get to be more stabilized in terms of what they're actually worth. But because they're so new, yeah, there's people that are, I mean, this is what takes place even with all these decentralized cryptocurrencies. That's what I mean. The crooks, the thieves, the control freaks, the parasite, they're always going to be, they're very creative and innovative themselves. And, you got to give them credit. They'll always find a way to try to make it a zero-sum game where they benefit at someone else's expense, which is why I'm still waiting for some of these cryptocurrencies to get the point where they meet all those proper requirements. As far as I'm concerned now, they're getting pretty close. It seems like at least there's a counter to the fiat currencies, and it does offer people that, especially if you're in a country right now, halfway around the world, that the government's constantly like devaluing. I mean, think of Venezuela. I mean, if I was in Venezuela, as much as cryptocurrencies, like I say, you are playing a little bit of a speculative game and stuff down, but it'd be a whole lot better than seeing your money, your purchasing power wiped out to the tune of, I think one year was almost 1,000,000% inflation, right? So I see why these cryptocurrencies are coming to light and how they're at least giving people a way to try to hedge against the devaluation. But yeah, they still, as far as I'm concerned, it's still not to the point where you have an actual mechanism that properly represents the market. That just goes to show, though, how powerful just market economics is, and it requires zero in terms of central planning, right? Because it's all of us determining freely, right? And I guess the Bitcoin eventually will get to that point right now, but because there's a finite amount of Bitcoins that can be mined, well, now it seems to be that the ones that are wealthy are going to have access to that. So you're still going to end up with some people are going to be benefiting at other people's expense. But like I say, these are all early iterations of something that I would say is very, very new. I guess they've been around for probably going on, I don't know, probably close to 10 years now. But it's still, when you're talking about anything that's, talking about something to challenge or counter, the kind of monetary system that we currently function under, hey, at least they're giving a value and effort. And it's like I say, giving people a hedge against the kind of, although me personally, not like I have a whole lot of extra money, but if I, wanted to have a hedge against inflation, well, to me, it'd be into the gold and the silver commodities, or even just things that are actual have tangible value that I know that will pay off rewards or dividends long off into the future for me. So a garden, right? Garden is a very valuable thing for people. Some people, that's the thing, the value of what other people place on it, well, that's all speculative and subjective. But for me, if I'm going to work hard for anything in remotely resembling like a dollar or cryptocurrency or a ruby or anything, I want to make sure that I'm putting that to good use and that it's going to, pay off in dividends long off into the future without me having to manipulate or steal from someone else, right? Because that does happen, and that's going to take place. Some people are going to be benefactors, even in voluntary exchange. Someone that's foolish enough to trade yeah, I'll give you 10 Bitcoins for, some piece of crap thing that's not worth 50 cents, right? I mean, people will still be tricked into those kinds of schemes, which is why I don't, like I say, I wouldn't sit here and say, okay, everyone should reject everything and just go straight into cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin or your thing. I've never done that, and I sure as heck won't, because to me, the most important thing is to respect all that value and all that productivity, all that labor, all that intellect that people provide in the world. Because I mean, millions of them every day, billions ultimately, produce a tremendous amount of wealth and prosperity. And I want them to be properly reflected, so that there is no way for anyone to manipulate that value externally, right? I mean, it can still happen in a voluntary exchange, but there's no way for someone else to do it in the abstract. It has nothing to do with that exchange. I might be able to trick you into buying something, but that's, once again, that's at least giving you the opportunity and some personal responsibility into doing that. And if I do trick you into something, snake oil, well, I'll guarantee the next time you're not going to, be willing to buy that snake oil again. Whereas if I can abstractly, without you ever seeing me, manipulate the value of what you're worth, which is what central banks and fiat currencies and fractional reserve banking has done because of the inflationary effect of it. Actually, inflation, and most people don't even think of this as being so, but it is. It's a stealth tax. Taxation is theft already, but that tax, you can actually see it when it comes off your paycheck or when you go buy something at the store, because it's usually written right on your bill. But that other part of that kind of forced wealth and income redistribution comes in the form of that inflation that we're talking about.
Okay. Very little to disagree with, but we can go back to the subjective valuation at another day.
Okay.
But right now, can we go back to the IOU?
Okay.
Now, I don't know how much time you have.
Oh, I got lots of time. Don't worry.
Okay. Well, my voice is beginning to go on me here. But if I don't want to, my point with the IOU, from a little unknown boy who's has dubious means of ever making a dollar, giving an IOU to an older gentleman who lives half a world away, let's say. Nobody in their right mind is going to take that with the expectation that it's going to be paid off someday. Even if the IOU says, not only do I owe you, but I'll promise to pay you X amount on a certain date, the probability of that is pretty zero. But now, if you take 1,000 of these in the form of a ruby, where the boy is pledging not to pay you, not to pay the person who buys the ruby that he created, but he promises in the future he will earn money, pay off his debt on his account in his time when he can. So what we've done is we have commoditized the ruby. It's not money, but like money, it's fungible. One ruby is just exactly like another, and it doesn't depend on a crippled 12-year-old Indian boy halfway around the world. It's just as good as any other. You're probably familiar with the mortgage-backed securities, which is an excellent idea. In the old days, a bank would loan money on a mortgage, and then you would pay the bank month after month, and then that bank would see its capital reserves dropping. I mean, as the loan gets paid off, then they would have to be thinking about making another loan and so forth. And if you defaulted on your home mortgage on your little local bank, you could put them out of business, maybe, or 3 or 4 of you did. So what happened is the mortgages have to meet certain criteria. The house has to be of certain quality. The price has to be within a certain range. And the banks have to do all the paperwork and processing. And then these are bundled together as a group. Could be 100, could be 1,000. And then investors buy pieces of this mortgage-backed security. So if a homeowner dies, whatever reason, defaults on the loan, it's foreclosed on, the investor in the mortgage-backed security doesn't even give a damn, doesn't know what happened. Now, that is coupled with our current financial system where the money gets injected at the top and they overcreate money and then they run out of suitable loans to make, and then everything falls apart. So what I've done is I've taken the ruby and I have commoditized it and I package it. It's still a ruby. You can buy a bunch or whatever. And it's tradable. just like that. It does not depend on any individual paying it back. The merchant's account, business account, whenever it transacts a ruby, we know in the long run of that course of the ruby being in that account being spent from it, 1% of that is going to go to Omega Central and neutralize all of the uncollectible bad IOUs. But we are giving, let's say with 1,000 rubies, 1,000, not rubies, 10, whatever, rubies to 1,000 young Indian boys. As they grow up, guess what? 80% are probably going to be able to be self-sufficient and be able to work toward paying that off. The ruby doesn't have a due date. Doesn't matter. As long as the ruby is in the form of a negative in somebody's Omega account, it allows the existence of a positive ruby that can be traded on an exchange at whatever the market value is at that time and place.
Okay. Okay. So just to get some clarifiers here. So
okay.
We're talking about, so ruby would be done in like I say, in a particular geographical, like a country such as Canada, because you said it wouldn't be universalized in terms of the globe. So you're talking basically, so let's just use, are you in the US or Canada?
US.
Okay. Well, I'm in Canada, but let's just use the US for an example then. So if the US was going to set up this ruby, is there like, there's obviously people still going to have to work because things have to be done. So the people that actually actively go out and participate in the labor of the workforce today, how are they compensated? So even if they work, are they getting, does everybody get like, because from what I've heard from most advocates of any kind of universal basic income is no matter what you do, whether you work or you don't work, or, you know, there's a basically a floor under them. So there's a minimum of so much per month or per week or per year, whatever you want to set it up. So is that something that happens in under your ruby or no?
It's part of the system. It is an intrinsic part of the way the system works. Let's say any person doesn't have to be in the confines of a country because the ruby doesn't recognize borders. But let's just skip over that for right now.
Okay, but early on when you were talking about that though, without the borders though, because like you were kind of alluding to earlier, $50 in Canada, one bag of groceries, I guess, so I'm lucky. $50 in Venezuela, American $50. Wow, you can buy a whole lot for 50. So that to me is that, like, you know what I mean? So
okay, now let's assume that this is going to go to some third world country. That's the people that are going to use them. There is a natural limit built in to who is going to want to bother with this, because when the ruby gets spent, 10% of it has to be attributed to the Omega channel to pay down the existing debt. And let's say you make create 1 ruby a day or 10 rubies a day. If you make 10 times as much as that money per day, there would be absolutely zero benefit for you to create any rubies whatsoever. Let's say they're worth $1 and you create 10 of them. If you made $100 a day on your own outside, you created 10 rubies. When you spent those 10 rubies, it would pay it off. I mean, there would be no net benefit to you. I mean, I didn't make that clear. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, yeah.
But as your daily income reaches 10 times, at 10 times as much, you have to funnel all of your money through the Ruby account. This is what I missed first time. Where you are a creator of rubies, you're pledging to funnel your income. And if your pay for the day is more than 10 times the value of the ruby, you funnel it through into your ruby account and you pay it all back out again. You pay that debt off immediately. So you, I mean, I realize it's going to take some time for that to settle in, but there is upper limit.
Because like I say, well, I just don't know how. So, okay, I go to work, let's say, you know, as a laborer for a construction company. So how does the employer determine, or let's say I haven't started my own business, but no matter which example you use, is if you're an entrepreneur, your own subcontractor, or you're an employee, who's determining or measuring what that is worth? Or when I go to work, if there's a floor, So once again, I'm trying to get back to what I was kind of alluding to earlier is the most important thing to me is the price discovery mechanism, or how we determine what
Okay.
person's labor or value is worth. That is, how do we get to that? Because there has to be some kind of mechanism, I would imagine, for people to be properly incentivized, where there has to be a medium or a measure of people's value. Like, because otherwise then it's just, you know, then you got the scenario where the doctor, like in some of these socialist countries, the doctor gets paid the same as, right, the checkout at the local grocery store, which obviously should not be the case, right? But
Okay.
that's my thing, is how do you gauge and measure that value, or what a person, like how would an employer under the Ruby system, how do I even figure out, first of all, how much is the person getting automatically before we've even entered into bargaining or negotiation for wages?
Okay. Good question. Um, if you're working for an employer, you and the employer are going to agree on your wage and whatever your local currency is. It's exactly what you've been doing now.
Oh, so you mean with the Ruby, we're still using the fiat currencies as well?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, well, that's kind of I was hoping to get out from underneath dealing with these fiat currencies.
I'm so sorry. I've been thinking about this for so long. It wouldn't even occur to me that it was going to try to supplant currencies.
Oh, to me, that's the most important thing.
Government fiat currency is terrible. The way they
Yeah.
create money is terrible.
Yeah.
It's going to keep on going, and the Ruby doesn't want anything to do with governments. Governments do whatever the hell they want to do, and heaven help you if you happen to live in the country that the government is worse. Find a better country. Good luck.
Yeah.
Anyway, no, Ruby is totally, absolutely separate. You work your job, you get your pay, but if you've created rubies with your account, you have pledged that you will run your paycheck through a ruby, which means your bank account, your credit union or whatever, probably will have an exchange where they will transact rubies to currency. So you get your paycheck in, you say, I need to run this through my account. They say, okay, rubies are this much right now, whatever it is. They buy them. And then immediately, because the rubies are that much about on the same time, they weigh about the same amount, sell them back out again, minus the 10% that goes into your Omega channel if you owe money. Did I say that too fast?
No, I get it, but I still, like, to me, that's because we recognize that fiat currencies and central bank fiat currencies are so destructive to the purchasing power and are actually causing, I mean, even the central bank in Canada, POAS, I captured the video because I was amazed that he actually admitted it in an interview, I think it was CBC News, but basically not only owned up to the fact that central bank has contributed greatly to the ridiculous prices in terms of the housing market in this country, but yeah, it's this printing of money, or the bailouts of the banking institutions, and all this debt burdens that's been placed on the people. That's actually causing more harm to the people that, are genuinely the ones that are at the bottom end of the socioeconomic scale. So prior to 2008, we already seen, because of all the crap that's already taken place, we already seen that, the typical household wages, well, especially for men in particular, Global News reported a few years ago, for the last 4 decades has basically been stagnant for like a typical male, middle-aged man or an average household. Whereas, the people that are getting access to these fiat currencies, or this central banking and stimulus or printing of the money, after the financial crisis, it actually increased, not fully exponential, but you can see where that, and like I say, the central bankers have even acknowledged that this central bank, this monetary system, they're basically using, what's the expression people try to say? I don't know, basically like used a great big spade shovel to try to plant one small little seed. Like, you're going to destroy more than you're ever going to create, right? That's so actually that monetary policy is causing the people that are poor. And I would imagine the reason why you're advocating for UBI, or most people that I've ever talked to that advocate for any kind of universal basic income, is not because we're worried about the people in the middle class or the rich. It's those people on that lower end of the social economic scale that we're looking to protect. And it's always those people based on the fiat currencies. Now, to me, like, if I were to create some kind of, if I was one of these super genius guys and I was a techie guy, and, sometimes I wish that I had a girlfriend back in the day that I could have been really into this stuff and learned coding when I was still a teenager. I kind of wish I did. But if I was going to create some kind of alternative currency or any kind of monetary structure, it would be to get out from underneath or completely sidestep fiat currencies. Now, like I say, right now, in certain places and in the US, I would say, you can use some of these. You can actually work for Bitcoin, people that actually work and they only get paid in Bitcoin. Usually it's people that are doing things online in the digital realm for the most part, but some probably still do some physical work too. And then you can go to, like, say, Amazon. There's only a select few places right now that'll take some, but then you can and you don't ever have to go near that fiat currency at all, which means that you can protect the people that are on that lower end of that social economic scale. So I would even, I kind of, I'm curious as to why you would even want to, if this Ruby has the means of what you're suggesting, why would you even want to deal with the fiat currencies at all?
Well, it's not because I want to, it's because they exist.
Yeah, right. But if you could get, people, like I say, because if we're incentivized, but this is the part where, once again, would governments even allow such thing as a Ruby, right? Because that's the end of the day. They don't even want to allow cryptocurrencies. And you can see today, the Bank of Canada just last week reported, the National Post, the Financial Post, both. Now they're trying to come up with their own cryptocurrencies because they see China is out in front trying to create some kind of cryptocurrency. Facebook's already out there with the Libra. They're calling it. They're going to create their own cryptocurrency. There's already Bitcoin. So we can definitely see there's going to be cryptocurrency space in the future. But my concern is, will this thing that you're constructing now, the reason why Bitcoin and these things can happen is because it's completely decentralized. So the governments, as much as they want to prevent Bitcoin from existing or flourishing, there's nothing they can do to destroy it other than shut down, the power grid across the entire planet, which obviously isn't going to work out very well, right? But for the Ruby, how are you going to do that when you're trying to have a kind of causal relationship with the fiat currency or government, when they're going to be automatically incentivized to make sure you never get your Ruby ever brought to light? That's another major concern I would have.
Okay, that was a lot.
Yeah, sorry. I know. It's just because I'm curious. It's not, trust me, I'm not trying to like totally like mess you up here. I'm just genuinely curious because I don't throw anything out without running it through the noggin like tremendously. I want to know, because if it's something that's viable, I'm not going to reject it.
Okay. For a long time, I was concerned that governments would shut it down. Right? But by its design, where each individual account has to have a proof positive ID, governments can actually use that as a way of tracking income. I'm not in favor of that, but right there on the blockchain. It's not designed to hide transactions. Now, a user, a Ruby creator, can go to a branch bank and do the transaction and have cash, and they spend that anonymously any way they want to, just like they do now. So the Ruby only knows that that person got so much money. What they did with it is that can be lost unless you transact with the Ruby to someone else. But I don't think governments are going to want to put this out of business, because if it's successful, the governments can get out of the welfare, universal basic income business. I'm not totally sure they want to do that because, like I said earlier, they take in tens of billions and they pay out hundreds of millions. So there's still an incentive for them to want to do what they do because of the control nature of it.
And the chance of the chance of politicians and bureaucrats trying to put themselves out of a job, I just don't. I've never seen a government program ever cease to exist or go away.
This brings up another aspect that I was hoping we could get into, but I didn't know that I really wanted to bring it up. And
if it's something that you might think that requires a even more in-depth discussion, like I say, we don't even have to just worry about doing this today. If you want, I'd be more than willing to have another conversation with you at another point in time going forward. Like I say, I just enjoy having these kind of engaging dialogues and conversation with people who are trying to, like myself, trying to figure out a way, to help the average person get out from underneath this kind of crazy system and scheme that's currently, detrimental to a tremendous amount of people. So it's up to you. Like I say, if you want to have another conversation, just kind of more focus on your Ruby now and maybe save that for another day, or if you want to bring it up, it's up to you.
No, that would be good. And I do want to say, governments are run terribly.
Yeah.
And with this whole business, with this epidemic and with the financial crash and all this there's a couple of ways, there's a couple of filters that you can use to look at it. And one is that they're horrible, evil people. The other is they don't know what the fuck they're doing.
Mhm.
They're just floundering. They're
Yeah.
dead. They're trying this, they're trying that, and they hope to hell it all holds together.
Mhm.
That is the most charitable that I can see. And here's the thing. I don't want you to take this as though I'm denigrating your
Oh
efforts
no.
in all of this.
Yeah.
But when you rail against the government
Mhm.
and explain why it is off the rails, everything that it does that's detrimental, unintended consequences, and everything like this,
Mhm.
convincing people that the libertarian approach to life is the more sane thing,
Mhm.
you don't have anything to offer, is the problem.
Actually, that's the thing. I actually do. And actually, that's why a lot of people, when they go through that intellectual journey of learning about libertarianism, and because like I say, I'm actually in a kind of not unique because I'm not the only person, but I grew up, under a lot of pretenses and very dogmatic religious people in my family. Taught a lot of stuff that I had to break through that whole paradigm as an adult. And once again, there was good positive attributes to some of the things and some of the teachings within the Bible. And some of it I still hold near and dear. And people ask me, do I believe in a creator? I like that. I like to believe it. When I'm talking with people socially or having an economic transaction, I got to take the mysticism out of my mind because that's a personal thing. And then I have to deal with the real world. And that's the only way it can work. And that's the thing about libertarians. What I realized early on, and when I was trying to go on this intellectual journey in terms of what it even means to be a free human being, because you hear constant talk, but once you start down that rabbit hole, there was a lot of people that identify as anarchists that would closely align with libertarians, because really what a libertarian is, well, there's two types of people that identify as libertarian. There's the ones they call minarchists, which they basically take the principles of libertarianism, but then they still try to create a state. And those would be the people, like I say, that are political libertarians. Whereas me, I prefer the pursuit of truth and knowledge. So I consider myself a philosophical libertarian. And the reason why I chose to identify as a libertarian, when I've looked at all the different ideologies or principles or stances on social or economic, is what can I possibly align with that's first and foremost universally consistent and has morality and those ethics that I grew up in. Because like I say, just like with Christianity, I'll reject a lot of the churches and some of the dogma that these preachers bring to it, but I would never throw the baby with the bathwater. I love the concept and the beauty of the Ten Commandments and some of the morality and the ethics that's entailed in that. Now with atheists, what happens is I have a lot of agreements with atheists when you talk about the impossibilities and the contradictions of what the state represents, because as once you deal with it, well, what is a state? Which is why I even said you early on when we were going to define the terms before we had this conversation, is what is government? Well, government is basically a monopoly of force or violence, the authority in any particular geographical location, but somehow they have these people that are in there that are politicians, that they're just people like you or I, but they get this magical capacity or ability to do things that you or I can't do. So if I go and take money from my neighbor, that's theft. If I try to tell my neighbor how to live, if he's not causing harm to no one, but I want to control his life by what he's allowed to do socially, then you can perceive of me as an authoritarian or a tyrant or a thief. Whereas if someone in politics says, hey, I'm a politician and people voted for me, and that somehow creates some legitimacy that they can now do things that I'm not allowed to do, right? That's the part where we're just like with the Christian teachings I was getting as a kid. I had to reject the bad stuff, but I recognized the good stuff that was entailed with that. So just like with socialism, I get why a lot of people that have that socialist tendencies, they want to help their fellow man and woman. They want to see a safety net. So I'm all for the compassion. But like I say, how do you get from A to B and maintain that kind of consistency and universality in terms of your morals and ethics, and even the utilitarian aspect of it? But morals and ethics have to be first and foremost, because that's what separates us from nature. What separates humans from nature is that we have created these constructs called ethics, right? We're not just mindless beasts that just whatever I could take, right? the power rules and whoever has to be sacrificed at the altar of power, too bad for them. No, I want to function and build and expand upon some of those Enlightenment era ideas or everything that we learned post-Reformation. And the libertarian moniker is there's 3 core principles of libertarian, and it's so simple, which is why, and I've dug down a million times over. I've had people challenge me, and I'm one of those people because I've rejected religion, I've rejected statism. I mean, I believed in the government and all that. So I obviously still have an open mind, even though I'm getting older now, but I still have an open enough mind that I'm willing to adopt new thinking and new principles or new ways of social or economic engaging, as long as, like I say, it stays adherent to these very important principles in terms of morals and ethics. Now, with a libertarian, the 3 core fundamental principles almost perfectly solidifies everything that I thought was good and moral, even whether it's under the Christian teaching or not. But first and foremost is self-ownership, right? So I'm a person born, and man or woman, or no matter who I am, right? Black, white, no matter, if I'm a human being, I own me. Nobody gets to claim ownership over me, my mind, or my body. That's to be a sovereign, free human being means that I own myself. That's the rejection of forced subjugation or slavery, which most humans have already got past that. So we're good there. And then by natural extension, that if I own me, then everything that I produce that's a product of my my labor, my hands, my feet, my body, or my mind, because once again, it's not just what I produce with my hands. It might be something that I constructed with my mind, and other people help me to bring that to fruition. But self-ownership and property rights, which means me, because I am the first and foremost property. Some people confuse when libertarians talk about property rights. Yes, anything I produce, or if I buy property, that's my property too. But it was what I did to produce the wealth, or to generate, whether I was homesteading or went out in the middle of the woods and created my own little area and built my own little, cabin in the woods. Once again, it's all based on the fact that I produced it. I created it from nothing. Nature was there, and I created it from nature, and whatever I produced by natural extension is mine, and no one else has any higher claim over it than me. So that's how all you do as a libertarian is just like if with math. 2 plus 2 is 4. 2 plus 2 being 4. That's easy. That's basic math. But then you get into algebra. But the only way those algebraic equations work out, where you can send a man to the moon, like on a spaceship in the 60s and 70s, or even today send someone to Mars, or to the far reaches of the universe, 14 billion years in terms of these telescopes and making these crazy observations. The only way that works is because you've universalized that mathematical equation. And to me, when you're talking about ethics and morality, then you have to do the exact same thing. And if you extrapolate self-ownership, property rights, and the non-aggression principle, which is that third one, so not to use preemptive force, violence, coercion, or theft towards your fellow man or woman, which I think most people agree with is the baseline in terms of morality and how we should all interact and engage with each other, then you just can't have the government. That's the thing. People say, oh, you libertarians, you just don't believe. It's not a matter of that. You can prove it objectively true that there's no such thing as having a legitimate ruler that gets to do things that I don't. So a perfect example, I actually set up a whole thing called a 4-question quest for freedom. And basically just within 4 questions, the first one I always ask is, do I have a right to take any portion of my neighbor's income, right? And then you just extrapolate. Well, if I ask a friend of mine to take from my neighbor on my behalf, do I gain some authority or legitimacy to do so? No. So if I don't have the authority to take from my neighbor against his permission, and I don't have the authority to ask another neighbor or a friend of mine to take from my neighbor against his permission, or I don't have any authority or legitimate claim or right to ask an entire group of people to take from my neighbor against his will, right? It's all theft. Under all those scenarios, it would all be considered immoral, illegitimate, and illegal. Properly so, right? But somehow if I go check someone's box off, once every few years and vote democratically, that I somehow have this amazing magical power that I can grant legitimacy or an authority to another human being, an authority that I don't possess myself. Like, that's magical, right? And to me, if we humans are going to advance past all this craziness that and it's a long journey, it's a long road. Like I said, I don't expect this is going to happen overnight. But the human journey, if we're ever going to get to the place where we actually understand freedom, then you have to at least own up to these universalities, which once again, I didn't create them. I'm standing on the shoulders of geniuses in the past who have built on each other's knowledge over the millennia. of trying to figure these things out, stuff out, all the way going back to Aristotle. So I'm saying for us as humanity to advance past all this central planning and manipulation of people's worth and dictating and controlling people's life it's about an intellectual evolution. That's what we need to get at as far as human beings. And it doesn't have anything to do with violent revolution. And me being the kind of person that I prefer, like I have 2 sons, I don't want them to get to the point where we have to go through some violent revolution, because a lot of bad things happen under those scenarios. To me, it's all about an intellectual. If we can get the human mind up to speed and actually starting to recognize and acknowledge what it is to even be free, because most people today don't even know. When I talk to people, most of the people, they're saying to me, don't tell me I should be free. Now, they're not saying those exact words, but when I'm talking to them, that's all my intentions are. It's not just for my freedom, but for me to be a free human being, I have to be willing to give you your freedoms too, which means I can't use government as a means to an end to impose my will and my edicts on you. And I have to make sure that that's reciprocal. We have to universalize that. Now, do I recognize that that's may not happen anytime soon? Yes. And that's the beauty of self-ownership and the ability to defend yourself. There's bad people that's going to exist, whether there's a government or there's not a government. Because people that always say, well, what happens if you get rid of government? Then you'll have all these bad people that'll do these bad things. It's like, don't you realize that you're already acknowledging that there are bad people and bad things that are going to happen, because there are people that are susceptible. And it doesn't even mean that that person is bad all the time. They could be just bad sometime, good most of the time. But because we all acknowledge that humans are fallible, it's such a weird argument if you've actually thought through it logically, when people say, oh, well, we need the state to protect us from bad people. But yet the state is a direct representation of, if you want to do bad things and you're very competent at it, or you want to be more efficient in the bad things you do, because a thief coming to steal from my garage, like, unless he comes and does it every week, like, which is, he's eventually going to get caught. Whereas if you go into government, you can do that. and because most people believe that it's legitimate for them to steal from me, even my neighbors, even my friends, even coworkers will be like, well, that's just the price. So I have to live and function in a world where most of the people are psychologically developed as adults based on our education system that are still basically functioning as adolescents. They don't even know what freedom is. And to me, the most important thing we can do, and people like yourself that are offering potential solutions to try to counteract or get out from underneath the central planning and government. Like I say, I'm a fellow traveler, man. Let's do whatever we can to get out from the current system. But like I say, in order for me to want to adopt or accept any kind of the alternative scenarios, it has to allow freedom to actually take place. If it's centralized, or someone else gets to do things that I'm not allowed to do, or like I say, people can just create value out of nothing, which then it destroys the very concept of value in some regard, then it's not going to work out beneficial to some or to all. For some, yes, but for me to universalize it, it means that we have to remove those last bits, and there's not a whole lot left in terms of, taxation. If we could get rid of taxation, then people would automatically gravitate to more voluntary means to help interact with each other on the social or economic realm. Anyways, I know I went on a big old tirade there, but I just wanted to kind of let you know kind of where I'm coming at it from these things. Is my main goal is not that as a libertarian, I think that I know everything or that bad things are ever going to happen. It's just for me to be at least consistent in my knowledge, because like I say, I grew up with so much. It's hard to fight through all those contradictions when you've been raised in religious institutions taught that way, or with government education systems that constantly teach you to think of things that in such ridiculous manners. Like, to me, clarity of thought and clarity of mind, right, and clarity of language is what's going to give us the most easy and adoptable form of freedom. And that's why, to me, it has to be simple. Anything like even what you're offering, it seems so overly difficult to even try to and I consider myself fairly smart. I'm not a genius by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm a pretty smart dude. But even when I'm listening, it's like, oh man, that sounds a little bit complicated, which means that the typical layman or the people at the lower end of that IQ scale are still going to be susceptible to other people that are going to want to try to game whatever kind of a system that you want to create to their great disadvantage. So that's always my concern with anything like this.
Very good. Excuse me. I'm getting dry here.
Yeah, I hear you. Hey, listen, if you want to even, I know we've been going on a couple hours here now already. And like I said, I'll gladly give you lots of time to respond and all that. Like I say, but even if you want and give yourself time to, maybe recollect your thoughts and maybe hammer this out and another further discussion later, I'm totally fine with that. Cause like I say, at the end of the day, it's not about, whether who wins or loses it's how can we come together to try to think these things? And maybe I could help you figure out other aspects of what your thing is suggested, because if it's voluntary, to me anything that's voluntary, even when socialists, I have a conversation with socialists, how I usually find out, I very seldom find ones that are actually honest about what their stance is, because they say voluntarily, but when I ask them, but would I be allowed, can I do my thing and not opt into your socialist thing? And usually I can't. Well, then it's not voluntarily. If you can create something, because to me as a libertarian and someone that respects freedom and the free market, is if your idea, matter of fact, like if Don's idea here turned out to be very beneficial for a tremendous amount of people, who the hell am I to say no? I say as long as they're all opting in voluntarily, I'm saying go for it. And that's the beauty of the free market, is you should have the freedom to experiment in whatever you want. Just like if we had an actual free, genuine freedom in terms of property rights, and government didn't get to impose their will or mandates or edicts on us social economically, I'd be more than willing to say to these people that are socialists, hey, go grab yourself a big old plot of land somewhere that's not occupied by anyone currently, that's not owned by someone else, where you're stealing their property, and try out a commune or some kind of socialist endeavor. And if you can make it work for you, good, because then I don't have to worry about you having to come over here and try to be parasites off of what little bit of money I can generate in life, right? If you can do it in your own way, then like I say, then we would both benefit on that side, because you can do your socialism, I can practice my more free market oriented economic exchanges. And if that works beneficial to you, who am I to tell you what to do?
Well, thank you, Bennett. I need to be going here for too long. I just want to thank you for inviting me to do this. I was afraid I was not going to be able to get any kind of understanding across or anything, and you've been fantastic. You have honed right in on weak spots already. We've only covered part of it.
I know.
And I do not expect that what I'm talking about here, calling a Ruby system, will ever be produced. Right. There is no need for it to be unique. This can be modified, replicated, dozens and hundreds of choices of this. But we will email back and forth and take some time to digest what you've heard, because I know it's a kind of a mind popper here. I would like I'd like to leave with a metaphor, which is metaphors are pretty terrible, but you're selling libertarianism. The spiel that you just went through is fine, and it gets people's attention, and they see what they're going toward. But if you are selling let's say you're selling a libertarian car, selling it to statist car owners, and you're saying, you govtards are driving a crappy car, the brakes squeak every time you go to stop, it's terrible, come and buy my libertarian car because it's cheaper and everything else. And then when they look into it and they say, well, my government car brakes squeak, but the libertarian car doesn't have brakes. Meaning the safety net that you want them to leave, the brakes so the car doesn't crash. Libertarianism, as of this moment, does not have a replacement. The Ruby system, I have thought long and hard about this, and this, I don't expect libertarians to say, oh, this is libertarian. What I'm saying is that libertarians can point to the Ruby system or something like it and say, not only is this a safety net, this is victim restitution. This is product liability. This is environmental protection, because compensation can come to the victim from the originator of the damage. They can be debited with an account that is created for them, negative rubies, and the victim gets compensated with positive rubies that they can use now.
Yeah. Well,
So,
listen, Todd, just to reiterate to you, like I say, because my friend, and he's a really good friend of mine, like I say, from Scotland. I'll just show it one more time. Universal in basic income for and against anti. Like I say, and he's a libertarian from the Scottish Liberty Party, I believe, or Libertarian Party. Anyways, so he's a libertarian himself, and like I say, I would even suggest to you to go maybe check his Facebook page, like I say, Anthony Samarov, or was it the Liberty Scottish Movement, I believe is what it's called. Well, I'll put a link to that in the description of this stream after we get done, so I can make sure. And if you want, you can check, because he's basically put forth, like I say, the pros and cons. Because as a libertarian, and he's more along the lines of me, because that's the thing, you do get some people that want to identify as libertarians, but they're basically just vulture capitalists. So they like the idea of not having anyone messing with what they want to do, right? Which that's going to take place. But Anthony is, along with people like myself, are people that think very critically and keep morality and ethics at the forefront of all these conversations. And Anthony, as you'll realize if you read, well, either read his book or like I say, just watch some of his videos in regards to the topic, he very much points out and lays out lots of evidence where you can make the case for a universal basic income. And like I say, even if you were to come here today and tell me you were just trying to make a utility type argument in favor of some kind of UBI in comparison or contrast to this massive bureaucratic state now, I would actually kind of have to yield in some way and agree that there is a way, I believe there is a way that you could have some kind of UBI that would, at least for a time, be much cheaper and help a whole lot more people than the current system or the current structure of the welfare system as it's done today. Because as it's done today, you got a lot of these people that work, for government, like they'll hand out a check in Canada. This is how low it is in like where I am. I think a typical adult age male is like $600 for the month. Like, good luck trying to live on that. But the people that's sitting there, the pencil pusher that's not really producing a whole lot in terms of generating wealth or productivity in society, the welfare caseworker is getting $60,000, $70,000 a year, and then a nice gold-plated pension, retired at 55, and adjusted for inflation for all those years, so that they're always their purchasing power always stays out in front. So I'm all for anything in terms of, you want to make the utility argument, that's something that challenges the status quo of their current paradigm, because I think there are arguments that you can make in terms of utility. But we still, to me, the biggest thing is we always got to keep in mind, and why I like to stress this as definitely the most important thing, is because especially when there's young people watching this, is the importance of keeping morality and ethics, intertwined with whatever we're talking about. So if there's any way, for people to use this as a means to cause harm to others, then, not necessarily a fan, but because I recognize that that's going to happen anyways. Like I say, if you give me the lesser evil arguments, I'll definitely pick the lesser of the evil every time. But on the other side of that, while I'm picking the lesser of evil, I'm still going to say I'm against evil. Right? Oh, yeah.
I guess I'm being paged.
Yeah. Right on.
We shall talk again.
Yeah. Anyways, Don. Yeah. So, yes, thanks for coming on, having this conversation with me. And like I say, just send me whatever you want me to link after this in the description of the video. Just send me anything like that, like your social media pages, or if you have anything else.
Nope.
And then, like I say, if we can communicate back and forth a couple more times in email, we can set up another conversation, maybe have it more point by point, so that we're kind of getting through the conversation. But at least we got to hear kind of a little bit about what each other stands for, their stance. And at least I kind of got a baseline premise of what you're kind of advocating for.
Appreciate you listening and attempting to understand.
Right on. All right, Don, you have yourself a great day, okay?
Right.
Okay, take it easy. Okay, so... all right, folks, I know that kind of went on a little bit longer than I was expecting, but like I say, I wanted to give the gentleman plenty and ample time to make his case. I think I still obviously it's not as clear as I was hoping we could get to. But like I say, I'm appreciative to have these kinds of conversations with people, because to me, I think at the end of the day, it's these kinds of conversations that really need to take place to give some of that clarity. Because I'm sure Don's now going to go back and kind of, reiterate and think about some of the original premises, and maybe he'll come up with a whole new different idea. But like I say, if based on what we're hearing, if whatever he's having on offer is an opt-in or opt-out voluntary thing, then of course I have nothing against it. The problem is, though, is when you get into the nitty-gritty details, right? That's where the the rubber hits the road is how do you get from here to there? And I've yet to hear anyone that's advocating for any kind of UBI. I get the utility, how you can make the utility argument, but how do you do that and still have the advocacy of a moral or ethical system? I don't know. Like I say, that's still a conversation that's still got to unfold. And like I say, we'll probably have another further discussion regarding this, and maybe it'll be even more enlightening in the follow-up conversation. But anyways, I really appreciate all you folks that did show up to the stream today. And actually, before I go, I did want to mention thank you again, Malcolm Johnson, for becoming a member. Really appreciate that. And I think I noticed a little bit earlier on as I saw it scrolling by, was there another one even? I would hate to finish this stream up and not acknowledge someone for becoming a member. I don't know. I might not be able to go up that far now. Oh, yes, there is. So this one as well. M. Foley. Oh, Mitchell Foley. That's who that is. That's got to be Mitchell. Thank you very much, Mitchell. I really appreciate that. And I enjoyed our conversation yesterday as well. And like I said, if you ever want to have another conversation with me, I'm more than willing to engage in dialogue. Because like I say, I love having these kind of profound discussions with people. And liberalism is not the issue. Socialism is the issue. And I would agree 100% there with you, Mitchell, that yes, liberalism, I share a tremendous amount of things in common with people that would identify properly as liberals based on what it actually means, right? Not because they want to reinvent the term, right? But yes, I would definitely agree. Same with conservatives. I've had some great discussions with people that actually, the problem is today, like I said so many times before, it's the clarity of language, folks. If we can clarify the language and get people understanding the actual words and terms that we're using, then we have that clarity of thought, and then we can have a lot better conversation, because then we're not talking past each other or over top of each other, right? So anyways, like I say, thank you, Mitch Foley. Like I say, I can't see what level you picked. I think I have to finish this stream up before I get to see what level you folks did choose in terms of your membership. But I will, like I say, at the very least, you both get a special shout out. And so special shout out to you, Mitchell Foley. And in addition to that, if you're up to the mid one, is you have access to the private chat, and I'll be doing a stream at some point in time now that there's getting enough people that are become members where I'll do a live stream, and it'll be just a members only thing, so a little bit more exclusive. And then of course, if you took the upper level and you're a Liberty leader, well, you get access to, just like Mr. G. Rich there, where we can have 3 conversations just like this, and talk about whatever the heck you want to for up to 3 times over the course of the year. So like I say, really appreciate everyone that has chosen to not just watch the stream, but anyone that's chosen to be members, and all those out there who have had to pass support or donations. Like I say, really, really appreciate all that stuff. And I want all you folks to have yourself a great day. And like I say, I'm not sure. It'd probably be tomorrow or the next day. I'll be back to the COVID analysis and discussion in regards to that. Because, yeah, there's still a whole lot of breaking news and some very disturbing stuff. Hey, let's not forget about now with Trudeau with the gun grab. So, yeah, lots to discuss, lots to talk about. So I'll be doing that, like I say, probably tomorrow or the next day. And I'll be looking forward to seeing most of you folks in that as well. Have yourself a great day. This is the Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.